Let me practice in peace, damn it. Get lost, said Lin Feng extremely coldly. At that moment, the atmosphere started to drop in temperature once again. Let me practice in peace, damn it. Get lost, said Lin Feng extremely coldly. At that moment, the atmosphere started to drop in temperature once again. The opponent didn't have the same arrogant expression he had when he arrived, he looked scared. Lin Feng was so strong. Damn, what the hell should I do now, said the opponent as he was insulting himself for having come across someone as strong as Lin Feng. At that moment, many other people in other cultivation rooms had also lost their concentration and their cultivation had been forcefully interrupted. They could feel Lin Feng's piercingly cold qi in the atmosphere. It had invaded the entire tower and was incredibly oppressing. Of course, they were not going to go and see what was going on. They didn't want to invite trouble from someone who could produce such a terrifying qi. Will you get the hell out of here or not? Said Lin Feng extremely aggressively with eyes revealing murderous intentions. The enemy was shaking from head to toe. He glanced at Lin Feng evilly and then went to look for another room within the tower. His current room would have to be left with Lin Feng. The strong can use aggressiveness and strength to scare the weak away. That is the reality of the cultivation world, thought Lin Feng while recalling his spirit back into his body. The young man in black clothes had wanted to steal Lin Feng's room until Lin Feng had shown his real power. He had thought that Lin Feng was weak. The second person had also wanted to seize Lin Feng's room for disturbing his practice, but considering the strength which Lin Feng displayed, the second person had been terrified and had immediately left. He didn't dare to act against someone so strong. That would have been acting recklessly. The path of cultivation was full of unkind people for whom the word compassion meant absolutely nothing. Someone weak and friendly would constantly get bullied. Someone strong and aggressive would be worshipped. The strong were respected and held in high esteem by everybody. Yuan Shan, you can use that room. You should also prepare some of your own purity stones. If the 3 stones I put it are not sufficient to practice for 3 months, then please use your own, said Lin Feng to Yuan Shan. Yuan Shan nodded. He didn't even try to prevent Lin Feng from leaving the cultivation room to him. He was convinced that relying on his strength, Lin Feng would face no difficulty in finding another room within the tower. Duan Feng and Jing Yun are a bit too weak. If the pure qi is too dense and thick, it will be of no use for them. Lu Fei, go to that room, said Lin Feng pointing at another room. Duan Feng and Jing Yun didn't say anything but Lu Fei said, if I use that one, what about you? No need to worry about me. I will find another one better suited for myself. Alright. See you in 3 months, said Lu Fei and then immediately entered in the cultivation room. Lin Feng then made Duan Feng and Jing Yun follow him so he could help them find a cultivation room. The 11th and the 12th floor were full, so they immediately went up to the 13th floor. He then found 2 rooms which were free for them to practice. From the 11th floor, all the rooms required less purity stones. They only required 1 purity stone of lower quality a day. One of Lin Feng's medium quality purity stones was enough to practice for 3 months. It made Lin Feng sigh with some regret. Cultivation costs were too high, especially when one wanted to cultivate faster. If he hadn't gone to the ancient temple, then he would not have had any purity stones at all. Now thanks to the ancient temple he didn't only have low-quality stones but he had medium-quality purity stones. The higher a person went within the tower, the less people there were and thus more and more empty rooms. Those who were willing to train in these rooms were not strong. They usually hadn't even reached the 3rd Ling Qi layer. They were also the students who did not have many purity stones to cultivate. On the contrary, strong cultivators usually had a great deal of purity stones. That kind of cultivator wanted to train on the lowest floors of the tower, and if they were strong enough then they would even train on the ground floor, directly next to the veins of the earth where the pure qi was extremely thick and dense. This was a vicious circle. Those who were strong rapidly became stronger while those who were weaker progressed much slower. Lin Feng was the last one left and he needed a room too. He didn't want to stay at the top of the tower, so he immediately went back down the flight of stairs. He passed by the 10th floor, 9th, and arrived on the 6th floor. He suddenly stopped. There were 8 cultivation rooms on the 6th floor. If a room was occupied, the hole in which the users inserted purity stones would be slightly flashing. Lin Feng walked around and stopped in a corner between 2 occupied rooms. He then sat down and started meditating. A pleasant and refreshing pure qi enveloped his body. The 6th floor wasn't that far from the ground. Even if Lin Feng wasn't in a room, the pure qi which was outside of an occupied room on the 6th floor was still denser than the pure qi in a room on the 10th floor. On the 10th floor, you even had to pay 3 purity stones of lower quality a day to use the room. Not being in a room but sitting outside the occupied rooms on the 6th floor was thus more advantageous to his cultivation. If students could choose a floor as they wished, they would all go to the lowest floors, but it was clear to everyone that those who trained on the first floors were extremely strong. They were the only ones who had the chance to choose the rooms on the first floors. Strength always guaranteed access to the best things in the world. But Lin Feng at this moment was cultivating outside of a room on the 6th floor. He immediately entered in a state of meditation. He didn't think for a second that this was not a normal thing to do. Not long after, some people passed by and saw Lin Feng practicing outside of a cultivation room. They thought that it was really strange thing to do on the lower levels of the tower. They were all very surprised by his actions. What, that? Surprisingly, there's a guy meditating outside of an occupied room on the lower floors. Isn't he scared to constantly be disturbed in his cultivation? Wondered one of the people who saw Lin Feng. Cultivation was about achieving peace and absolute serenity in one's heart. It was possible to efficiently inhale the natural qi of heaven and earth only when that state of mind was reached. Jealous people would not hesitate to try and disturb him. But Lin Feng was sitting outside of an occupied room where many people could pass by. How could that not attract other people's attention? But the strangest thing was that an insanely thick and dense pure qi was rapidly flowing around him and penetrating into his body. Surprisingly, there was nobody disturbing him. That guy, even if he doesn't have purity stones for his own room, he shouldn't practice there like that. What if someone disturbed him at the most crucial moment of his practice? That would be really horrible for him. That guy is so ignorant. If a malicious person attacked him by surprise, the consequences would be disastrous on his future cultivation. Many people were thinking the same thing when they passed by Lin Feng and saw him sat out in the open. Actually, it was forbidden to disturb other people once they were in a room and had already started practicing. The Celestial Academy didn't accept such behavior because they wanted to provide their students with the best cultivation environment. But Lin Feng wasn't inside of a cultivation room at all. Instead, he had decided to study outside of a room on the 6th floor. Doing so was extremely dangerous. However, Lin Feng was sitting next to a cultivation room. Suddenly, the pure qi in the room next to Lin Feng was becoming weaker and weaker. Some people noticed this and were watching on with dazed expressions. That probably meant that that person's time had elapsed. Somebody was probably going to come out and see Lin Feng sat there. At the same time, Lin Feng opened his eyes. The pure qi surrounding him had progressively stopped being absorbed into his body. He looked at the door of room next to him and stood up. The crowd was surprised. They had just understood why Lin Feng had been sitting outside of the occupied room. He was not planning to stay outside of a room for a longer period while cultivating. He was just waiting for a room to be free. But was Lin Feng going to get it? At that moment, many people started walking towards that room with determined looks on their faces. They understandably all wanted to have access to a room on the 6th floor of the tower. On the 6th floor, the pure qi within the cultivation rooms was already very thick and rich. On the 6th floor, the pure qi within the cultivation rooms was already very thick and rich. Some people had seen Lin Feng cultivating outside of the room on the 6th floor. Initially, some of these people were actually only passing by and were heading towards higher floors, but because they had found the scene fascinating, they had stopped on the 6th floor and forgotten about their previous plans. Besides, some of them were also attracted by the room which was being opened even though they didn't have the required strength to normally reserve such a room. If they managed to get that cultivation room, they would definitely be able to boost the speed of their cultivation. The light emitted by the pure qi finally dulled completely inside the room. The stone door made a rumbling noise as it started to open itself. Everybody started taking steps towards the door and was fixedly staring at it as it opened. Finally, the door opened itself and everybody stared at the silhouette coming from the room. It was a young man with a sword on his back. When he saw the crowd, a strange and enigmatic smile appeared on his face. "You all want this room?" said the young man with the long sword. He had an incredibly evil look on his face. Nobody replied in the crowd, but the expressions on their faces showed that they really wanted it. "Well, if you want it then I will give it to you," said the young man with an evil smile on his face. He moved away from the entrance and stood by the side, to allow them access to the room. At that moment, there was nobody in the room and the door was wide open. The crowd was looking at the room as if they were a bunch of starving people looking at a mountain of food. However, instead of rushing over to the room, no one was moving at all. They were all looking at each other and didn't move towards the room. Nobody was moving because they knew that the first to go towards the room would be attacked by everybody else. Even if it was their brother, they would attack him. Their greed was truly intense. Nobody was willing to be the first one to move towards the room. Of course, there were always exceptions. And Lin Feng fearlessly started moving towards the room. Lin Feng walked towards the room looking natural and at ease. While standing before the door, he turned around and looked at the crowd. "I was the first one waiting here. This room is mine. You should go and find another one." The people in the crowd were looking at him with a cold smile on their faces. "The first one? What the hell does that mean to them?" That means absolutely nothing to these people. In the world of cultivation, the only way to persuade people was strength. Being fair and just was not an argument these people would listen to. Besides, he was telling them to find another room. Under the 10th floor, it was almost impossible to find empty room. What did he want them to do? Go to the top of the tower. You cannot have that room. Get lost, said one of them while coldly staring at Lin Feng. Hee. If you want to have that room, you should first insert some purity stones, said another person with an evil smile on their face. They thought that the moment when Lin Feng would put his purity stones in the hole, that would be the best moment to attack him. Lin Feng glanced at the crowd. Nobody was attacking him at all. A piercingly cold qi emerged from Lin Feng's body and his ice spirit appeared behind him. His ice spirit didn't stop spreading in the atmosphere. Everything was turning white with a layer of frost. That ice was way too cold and way too strong. But it didn't scare the crowd away. Apart from a few weak students, most of them were extremely strong. "Whoever wants this room, you are free to come and try to take it from me," said Lin Feng with a cold tone. The atmosphere suddenly became even colder. Some sword qi had also emerged from his body and invaded the atmosphere together with the ice qi, emitting whistling sounds as the qi whirled in the air. His ice qi was just as sharp as his sword qi. It was almost piercing through people's skin. Lin Feng's long hair was swaying from the wind created by his qi being released into the atmosphere. He looked like an experienced cultivator, but he also had a look of confidence on his face. Sword force. The crowd was stupefied and terrified by the extremely strong and power-piercingly cold sword force which was hidden within the qi. No wonder this young man can be so aggressive. Even though the sword force which emerged from his body was only diffused with the strength of the third Ling Qi layer, it was extremely intense and sharp. It could even be strong enough to defeat some cultivators of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Besides, his sword force coupled with his ice spirit made him very difficult to defeat even for a cultivator of the 4th Ling Qi layer. But in the crowd, there were quite a few people who were cultivators of the 4th Ling Qi layer and they were fixedly staring at Lin Feng. All those who were of the 3rd Ling Qi layer were leaving the crowd one after another. They had been discouraged by the combined energy which Lin Feng had been releasing. I tell you to attack me but you don't, I tell you to leave but you don't leave either. What the hell? How indecisive and hesitant can you people be? You guys definitely don't have the courage and the determination required when walking on the path of cultivation, said Lin Feng coldly. He took a few steps forward and the sword chi as well as the ice chi emerging from his body were growing stronger and stronger. 8 strikes of desolation, said Lin Feng while attacking with both of his hands. A mixture sword chi and ice emerged and spread through the atmosphere. Lin Feng surprisingly was the one who had taken the initiative to attack. The crowd moved at the same time and intercepted Lin Feng's 8 strikes of desolation attacks, but at the same time Lin Feng started running forwards and a magnificent glow appeared on his sword. Suddenly a bright light pierced through the air leaving behind only a magnificent glow. A few people in the crowd didn't have sufficient strength to block the attack and were thrown backwards as blood was splashing all around them. All these cultivators of the 4th Ling Qi layer had attacked at the same time and it had become a very chaotic scene. Sword of Nirvana. A sword chi which created whirlwinds in the air appeared around Lin Feng's long sword. Ice chi, sword force and his sword of Nirvana started to spread together through the air as if they were in a complete fusion. The power moved at the speed of light with overbearing dominance. However, the enemy's attacks were everywhere. There were too many people and their attacks were sometimes cancelling out other people's attacks even though their initial goal was to attack Lin Feng together. It had become complete chaos. Rumbling noises unceasingly spread throughout the atmosphere and progressively became lower and lower until silence invaded the air again. They were all surprised. There were so many people and they had all attacked Lin Feng at the same time but had been unable to defeat him. Without any structure to their attacks, they had been too chaotic. I will give you a second chance. Is there anybody else who still wants to try for this cultivation room? Said Lin Feng while coldly glancing at the crowd. The entire crowd was just fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Nobody dared move. It had been made completely clear that nobody wanted a one-on-one battle against Lin Feng. Since you don't dare to fight me any longer then don't try to steal from me again or next time you will all die, said Lin Feng who still emitted a strong cold chi into the air. Nobody in the crowd would dare to doubt Lin Feng's words. If they tried to steal his room, he would really kill them. Lin Feng turned around and didn't look at the crowd again. He took out 3 purity stones of medium quality and inserted them in the hole in the wall. At that moment, a brilliant and radiant pure chi appeared. There was an incredible quantity of pure chi in the room. The entire crowd looked on with envious stares. These people looked like they wanted to attack Lin Feng again out of pure greed, however when they recalled the previous scene they quickly calmed down. They were all very strong cultivators. They had all broken through to the 4th Ling Qi layer and Lin Feng of the 3rd Ling Qi layer had surprisingly managed to scare them to death to the extent that none of them dared attack him again. If that news spread, they would all lose face. Nobody would ever believe that they lost because Lin Feng of was too strong, they would rather assume that those few students of the 4th Ling Qi layer were just too weak. Lin Feng was about to enter in the cultivation room when a cold and detached voice said something. Wait. Lin Feng slowly turned around and looked at the person who was talking. It was the young man with the long sword who had initially left the room. You seem to be forgetting somebody, said the young man with a strange and evil smile on his face which made Lin Feng have a strange smile too as if he was disgusted. If you have something to say it quickly instead of making me waste my cultivation time, said Lin Feng aggressively. The young man with the long sword made an evil smile and said, I initially intended to tell you that I would give you the room only if you gave me 3 purity stones of medium quality but now I'll ask you for 6 instead. Otherwise, you'll have to give me back my room. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Give him back the room. He was demanding 6 purity stones of medium quality. How ridiculous. On top of that, when Lin Feng was putting the 3 purity stones into the hole, that guy hadn't said a single word. He had only been waiting for the moment when Lin Feng was finished so he could attack him and steal his room. This guy had calculated everything. No wonder he had been standing there the whole time. How shameless. The crowd was also exasperated. That guy was really shameless. They were thinking about how horrible it would have been if they had been Lin Feng. What? Is there a problem? Said the young man when he saw that Lin Feng wasn't replying. The young man had an evil smile on his face. Lin Feng looked at him for a second and then said, "Now, I will advise you to run away and go as far as possible from my sight." Now, I will advise you to run away and go as far as possible from my sight. Now, I will advise you to run away and go as far as possible from my sight. A strong and intense cold chi had accompanied Lin Feng's words. The young man's smile vanished. His facial expression became as sharp as his sword. I will give you one last chance. Give me 12 purity stones of medium quality, said the young man with the long sword in a cold tone. An incredible amount of sword chi emerged from his body and started moving towards Lin Feng. A fight between sword masters, exclaimed people in the crowd. They noticed that the sword chi released by the young man and by Lin Feng were the same. They probably both had a sword spirit, otherwise their sword chi wouldn't be that powerful. Lin Feng had also released sword force into the atmosphere. Do you think that such a small amount of sword force is enough to beat me? Especially when used by someone like you, said the young man with an evil look on his face. When the young man stopped talking, he released a gigantic amount of sword force which created whirlwinds in the air as it consumed the atmosphere. Whistling sounds spread throughout the entire atmosphere. The power of his sword chi and sword force had enveloped everyone on the 6th floor of the tower. The sword force was everywhere in the atmosphere. It looked like it would destroy anything in its path. The young man had a higher cultivation level than Lin Feng. He had already broken through to the 4th Ling Chi layer. Just like Lin Feng, he could use forces in an extremely large scale. No wonder that he had been so arrogant and aggressive. He was confident that he would be able to take over the room from anyone within the crowd once they put their purity stones inside. And even if Lin Feng didn't agree to hand the room over, the young man with the sword just had attack Lin Feng and make him leave. It's a good thing that none of us got the room after that battle, said the people in the crowd, happy that Lin Feng had scared them away. Otherwise, they would have had to fight against the young man who had just released such incredible amounts of sword force. He was at the 4th Ling Chi layer and knew how to use such huge amounts of sword force. They weren't strong enough to fight against him. It wasn't different for Lin Feng even though he had showed some skill previously. He was undoubtedly going to lose that fight. What could he possibly do against such an overbearing power? You are correct. Do you think that such a small amount of sword force is enough to beat me? Lin Feng used the young man's own sentence against him. He took a step forwards and his deadly sword started moving through the air as he thrust it forward. Everybody was stupefied. In such a situation, Lin Feng didn't even consider the possibility of giving the young man his purity stones and did not even plan to hand the room over. Instead, he was being even more aggressive. The young man was stupefied as well. He hadn't managed to scare Lin Feng away with his display. Instead, he wanted a fight. You're following the path to your own doom. I will make it so that you are never able to pick up a sword again with your meager skills, said the young man while smiling arrogantly. A whistling sound spread through the atmosphere and a magnificent and radiant golden light filled the 6th floor. It looked like the rays of the morning sun. Lin Feng's deadly sword and the young man's sword collided, emitting an extremely loud metallic noise. Golden sword. His sword turned gold and releases another light which was as beautiful as the morning sun. Golden Rain sword, shouted the young man. Suddenly, the dazzling light around his sword became even more dazzling and refracted through the atmosphere. There wasn't even a single corner not illuminated by the light from his sword. What a beautiful sword skill! I would have no chance to defeat such a masterful display, said some of the cultivators of the fourth Ling Qi layer in the crowd. The young man with the long sword could definitely afford to be arrogant with his level of skill. Lin Feng was going to die. The area was too small and it was impossible to escape the light of his sword. He had nowhere to go if he wanted to dodge the attack, there was nowhere left to escape. I will teach you what it means to be a real sword master, said the young man with extreme arrogance and a cold smile on his face. The young man's golden rain sword skill made rays of light fall from the atmosphere as they were raindrops. Lin Feng, who was in the middle of the attack, didn't move back and looked calm as ever. Lin Feng's sword force had already vanished without leaving trace. Is he giving up? Said some of the people in the crowd when they saw that Lin Feng's sword force had disappeared. They were stupefied. The young man was extremely strong, he had managed to make Lin Feng give up and stop using his sword force as if he knew the situation was hopeless. Not only was the crowd stupefied but the young man too. Lin Feng had voluntarily stopped releasing sword force, why? The young man's arrogant smile grew even wider when he saw the force disappear. His arrogant smile didn't last for much longer as suddenly, he looked stunned. An oppressive sword energy suddenly crashed onto his body and prevented him from moving. What's this? The young man's pupils shrank. The qi was becoming more and more oppressive. The young man had the feeling that he was suffocating under the pressure. This was the result of all the sword energy in complete fusion. This required combining his sword force and sword qi into a single power. The young man looked at Lin Feng and saw that he looked as calm as before. The young man felt his heart sink when he realized what had happened. That's the sword energy. The young man with the sword was a sword master and recognized the skill. Lin Feng could already use a sword energy attack. That meant that he could already control almost all of the sword energy to perfection. What a genius! The sword energy attack required an incredible amount of sword force and sword qi. Who could resist to such an attack? Lin Feng's attack didn't even look special, but suddenly, a hole appeared in the young man's sword and suddenly it disintegrated itself. The whole crowd was shivering at such an incredible display. How was that possible? Lin Feng's attack had barely been noticed by anyone. It looked so random and so normal but had been sufficient to destroy the magnificent and extremely powerful golden rain sword. Retreat! The young man's expression suddenly drastically changed. He had no time to carry another powerful attack because at that moment, Lin Feng's sword energy was already on him. He wouldn't be able to block it. A hurricane-like vortex made of sword energy emerged from Lin Feng's body and flew through the air towards the young man. His body started shaking violently and then he heavily collapsed. At the same time, the tip of Lin Feng's sword arrived on the young man's chest. Everybody was astonished and shivering. They were speechless. Nothing of what they expected had happened. Lin Feng had needed a single strike to defeat such a powerful opponent. At that moment, the young man's life was in Lin Feng's hands. This is all the skill that you have and you dare to say that you will teach me how to use a sword, said Lin Feng coldly. The young man was speechless. Indeed, the young man had broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer and could use forces, but Lin Feng had only broken through to the third Ling Qi layer and was already able to exercise perfect control over sword force to the extent that he was able to absorb and make it fuse with other qi and force to make a sword energy attack. After having displaying his abilities in front of everyone, being arrogant would make him gain even more prestige within the academy. Your sword is not sharp. You lack too many things. You are too arrogant. While trying to do beautiful and magnificent attacks, you stray from the true path of the sword. You must focus your sword to be sharp and precise. As far as swords are concerned, you definitely an amateur, said Lin Feng in a detached tone. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, sword skills were about having more refined skills, more power, more sharpness, more speed, and was not about how beautiful they looked. "What do you intend to do with me?" said the young man as he completely ignored what Lin Feng had just said to him. He was just worried that Lin Feng would kill him. When Lin Feng saw him, he shook his head looking saddened and said, "A moment ago, when you were aggressive and threatening me, I thought that you were a real sword master and that you were seeking enlightenment on the path of cultivation, but you have disappointed me. You do not even take my advice on improving your sword skills. You are just a shameless guy who wants to stand above others using his sword. I think it would be best if you never held a sword again." When Lin Feng finished talking, his long sword glowed and he then immediately cut off the young man's sword hand. The young man gave a horrible shriek as he looked at the place where his hand used to be. "How bloodthirsty and ruthless," said people within the crowd. Fortunately, they had not made Lin Feng angry and attacked him a second time. He was terrifying. The young man's eyes were filled with wrath and hatred. He was staring at Lin Feng, but Lin Feng just replied coldly, "No need to look at me with such eyes. You said it yourself a moment ago. You said that you would make it so I could never hold a sword again. I simply returned what you intended back onto you. If there is one person that you should blame, it is definitely yourself." Immediately after, he turned around and entered in the cultivation room without even glancing back at the young man and the rest of the crowd. The entire crowd had a cold sweat running down their backs. That's right, if they had exchanged places with that young man, Lin Feng could have possibly removed one of their limbs. Lin Feng didn't like being cruel, but he didn't like being provoked either. Lin Feng entered in the cultivation room and suddenly, a rumbling noise emerged. It was the noise of the stone door closing itself. Lin Feng entered in the cultivation room and suddenly, a rumbling noise emerged. It was the noise of the stone door closing itself. A thick and pure qi invaded the entire room. Lin Feng was feeling extremely comfortable with the dense qi surrounding him. When cultivating, being exposed to the pure qi of heaven and earth was extremely beneficial. The feeling was like sudden rain after a long drought. It helped cultivators consolidate the very foundations of their cultivation and strengthen their foundations as they advance. Lin Feng released his celestial spirit and entered into meditation. His celestial spirit would definitely help him receive a breakthrough at a much faster rate. He would be able to control every cell within his body in a much more precise way and would probably be able to break through to the next Ling Qi layer at an increased speed. Suddenly, pure qi started entering in Lin Feng's body as if Lin Feng was a bottomless pit swallowing all of the energy available. Lin Feng's strength was at the third Ling Qi layer, so he had absolutely no problem to inhale all the pure qi which filled the cultivation room. It seemed like the amount of qi he could absorb was almost endless. The pure qi that Lin Feng had already absorbed was circulating within his body and becoming even purer. The qi once purified within his body had started penetrating into Lin Feng's flesh, muscles and blood, making them purify. He could feel that his body was becoming stronger and stronger. Because of this transformation within his body, he knew that he would be able to practice at much greater speeds. Besides, the pure qi in his muscles had also turned into a pure qi which would increase his agility techniques in the future. Even though Lin Feng wanted to become strong, he knew that rushing to advance would cause greater harm than good. On the path of cultivation, a person required breakthroughs which one could only find with enlightenment and battles. Cultivating was only a small step on the path, and life experiences are where the advancements came. What Lin Feng didn't know that while he was cultivating, some evil-looking people were moving into the tower from the outside. They moved directly towards the flight of stairs and then started climbing the floors. They finally came to a halt on the 10th floor. "That way," said a young man in black. If Lin Feng had been there, he would have recognized the young man in black as he was the person whom he just defeated on the 10th floor. The young man in black had threatened Lin Feng when he left the tower, but Lin Feng hadn't taken him seriously. Many people would make baseless threats from the anger of being humiliated. In the end, it was actually Lu Fei who was practicing in that room. "Here," said the young man in black while pointing at the room. The one who was accompanying the young man was about 20 years old. He looked extremely cold and evil. "Cui Ting, open the door," said the evil young man. Another person moved forwards. Despite the rules of the Celestial Academy, he didn't hesitate and started running towards the door at full speed and thrust his fist directly towards the door. He then collided heavily with the stone door. The door remained closed, but it was strongly shaking from the impact. Lu Fei was in a deep state of mediation behind the door. She wouldn't have thought that she would get disturbed during this period, especially by people directly attacking her door. The noises immediately woke her from her meditation. There was a small trail of blood on the corner of her mouth because of the shock she received while in meditation. "Get the hell out here," said an extremely loud voice from outside. Lu Fei was furious. She wiped off the blood from the corner of her mouth. How impudent! Lu Fei stood up. She wanted to rush outside and crush them. One of the worst things to do in the world of cultivators was to disturb someone while they were meditating. Besides, they had woke her up in such a violent way that she had been injured in the process. Being woken up during meditation was such a shock that a cultivator could get injured if it was not done correctly. Disturbing a meditating cultivator was such an offense that the academy didn't forbid fights between students but forbade them to disturb others while they were already meditating in cultivation rooms. But the opponents had clearly violated the rules of the academy. "Shit, I can't do that. I can't attack them." Lu Fei, who had stood up to go outside and crush them, suddenly stopped. Maybe the person hadn't come for the room but had come to fight against Lin Feng. It must be him. Lu Fei remembered the young man in black. When leaving, he had threatened Lin Feng. He hadn't lied, he had come back. If I went out now, that would probably cause trouble for Lin Feng. Lu Fei thought. Besides, she didn't know who would win if they fought. In this world, only strength mattered, nothing else. When she thought about the current situation, she sat down again and tried to meditate, but obviously, it was very hard for her to continue her cultivation. Boom, rumbling noises spread in the cultivation room. Lu Fei's eardrums were hurting from the constant loud bangs. "You who's inside, come out immediately," shouted a loud voice from outside. Lu Fei was angry but ignored it. She kept sitting. At worst, he would keep shouting until he was too tired or until someone intervened. The door of the cultivation room would never crack open. It was impossible for the people outside to manage to do such a thing. They were far from being strong enough. When the enemies saw that nobody was reacting inside, they were speechless. The young man in black moved towards the door and furiously shouted, "Were you not being very aggressive and arrogant before? Are you too scared to come outside now? Coward! Weakling! Coward, weakling!" When Lu Fei heard what the young man had called Lin Feng, she was surprised and found him ridiculous. That guy had been easily defeated by Lin Feng, so he had brought people to help him, and he dared call other people cowards and weaklings? Only weak people could do such things. How ridiculous. What would Lin Feng do if he was there? The door was unceasingly rumbling. Lu Fei didn't react, but she was very upset. In such a small and narrow room, anybody would go crazy if they were harassed this way by other people. After a while, the rumbling noises stopped. The young man in black calmed down again. He wouldn't have thought that nothing would work against Lin Feng, especially the insults. He felt powerless and had no strategy left to try. "Looks like he knows what is best for him and cowers inside the room," said the young man in black coldly. The evil-looking man then asked, "How many purity stones has he inserted?" The young man in black replied, 3 purity stones of medium quality, which is enough to practice for 3 months. "All right, I'll come back in 100 days. What about you? Are you staying or are you coming with me?" The young man in black didn't reply and looked hesitant. "He could run away if you leave, but you're also probably scared that he will come out to humiliate you again," said the evil young man, as if he had guessed what the young man in black was actually terrified of, facing Lin Feng alone. The young man in black was surprised. This is exactly what he was worried about. Cui Ting is already at the peak of the 4th Ling Qi layer. Nobody in the 3rd Ling Qi layer could possibly defeat him, even if they are an unrivaled genius. Coming with him was more than enough to defeat that person. Since you insisted for me to come along too, I decided to follow. However, now I am going to the 1st floor to practice for 3 months. You can ask Cui Ting if he wants to stay and wait with you, said the evil-looking young man calmly. The young man in black didn't dare call into question what the evil young man had said. The evil-looking man was also a member of his family after all. They had the same father but not the same mother, and the young man in black was merely the son of a concubine. The evil-looking man had already done him a great favor by coming. He had given him a great deal of face. The young man in black looked at Cui Ting. The expression in his eyes indicated that he was begging him to stay with him. If Hei Mo wants me to stay, then I'll stay, said Cui Ting indifferently. If that is the case, just stay here for a little while then, said Hei Mo. He then turned around and left towards the 1st floor. When the young man in black saw Hei Mo leave, a sad expression appeared on his face. He then turned around and looked at the stone door. He took a step forward and punched it again. It created an extremely loud rumbling noise which filled the room. Lu Fei was extremely upset as she was still inside the cultivation room. Would they never stop bothering her? At that moment, Lu Fei's face turned deathly pale. If the young man in black kept harassing every day for 100 days, she would go crazy. Besides, Lin Feng had spent 3 purity stones of medium quality in this room. If she was harassed every day for 100 days, that would be the same as being kept in captivity and tortured for 100 days. This was a complete nightmare. She had never thought that such a thing could happen. At that moment, the pure qi on the 6th floor was strange. Some curious people had gone there wondering what was happening. A silhouette was emerging from a room. It was a young man. He looked calm and serene, but that calm and serene facial expression made the entire crowd shiver. The young man's look was as sharp as a sword and he looked extremely domineering. The young man who came out was Lin Feng. The young man who came out was Lin Feng. It goes so much faster when cultivating within a room on the 6th floor, thought Lin Feng. 100 days before, Meng Qing's cold qi in the room had been such a shock for him but had helped him reach the peak of the 3rd Ling Qi shortly after when cultivating he had broken through to the 4th Ling Qi layer. His current cultivation was close to reaching the 5th Ling Qi layer. Of course, Lin Feng understood that sitting in a cultivation room for 100 days wasn't all a cultivator had to do to advance. There were many other things a cultivator needed to learn and practice in order to become stronger. Outside of training and practice, there was control of emotions, state of mind, battle experience and life experiences. All of these were necessary to break through to a higher qi layer. The opposite was true too though. If a cultivator only practiced outside and fought but never cultivated, then he also wouldn't be able to progress. There had to be a balance. Lin Feng raised his head, glanced at the entire crowd outside of the room and left. He was wondering how Lu Fei's training had been going since he left her. When the crowd saw that Lin Feng was leaving, they suddenly felt relieved. However, they all looked to their right then to their left, carefully watching everybody else getting ready to fight them for the room, but that already had nothing to do with Lin Feng any longer. While Lin Feng was walking to go to the 10th floor, the young man in black was still there waiting. He could feel that the pure qi coming from the room was getting weaker and weaker. The young man in black had an evil smile and was getting ready to attack the one he thought was in the room. He punched the door once again and made it tremble. Besides, the young man in black wasn't worried at all because Lin Feng probably hadn't become stronger at all. He had been punching at the door of the cultivation room every single day for 100 days. It was impossible to practice in such conditions. Finally, "You're about to come out," said the young man in black while waiting for Lin Feng to come out. The door of a cultivation room opened itself automatically when the pure qi of a room was completely consumed, otherwise people would be stuck inside forever. The door made a loud rumbling sound and opened itself. Cui Ting and the young man in black only saw a beautiful girl come out of the room. "It's you," said the young man in black as he looked completely stupefied. He was blankly staring at Lu Fei. He had been waiting for 100 days and suddenly, the person who came out was Lin Feng's friend, the beautiful young girl. Lu Fei's face was thin and pale. She looked so pitiful and was completely exhausted, but her facial expression also revealed fury. She was staring at the young man in black and said, "How impudent." "Impudent?" The young man in black looked at her with an evil expression. He would have never thought that the person that he had been waiting for 3 months was the wrong one. No wonder the person inside hadn't reacted to his insults. If it had been Lin Feng, he probably would have come out. "Since it's you and not your friend, I will take you with me." "You will have to suffer in his place," said the young man in black with a perverted look. He was fixedly staring at Lu Fei's body and found her extremely alluring. He also thought that her angry expression made her even more attractive. He felt quite excited while looking at her. "Hee, if he gave you the room, it means that you must be very intimate. If I have a taste of you, he will definitely go insane," said the young man in black with the same evil expression on his face. Cui Ting glanced at him. He really despised the young man in black. He was definitely the son of a concubine, incapable of controlling himself when facing a beautiful woman. What a humiliation for Hei Mo to share the same blood as this degenerate. But Cui Ting said nothing. After all, Hei Mo and he still shared the same blood. He couldn't attack him even if he wanted to. When Lu Fei heard what the young man in black said, she looked disgusted. "How impudent, disgusting. You already said that once, but because you like those words so much, I will show you what it's like to be impudent. That cultivation room is quite big, isn't it? It will be perfect to accommodate the both of us. When your friend comes back he will see us both in an embrace, loving each other. It will be a wonderful moment," said the young man in black with a huge smile on his face. Cui Ting was stunned. At that moment, the young man in black felt an extreme chill run down his spine. A freezing cold qi surrounded his body and applied heavy pressure. He turned his head and saw Lin Feng, who was releasing the strong qi. The young man in black had been looking forward to seeing Lin Feng, but at that moment when he was standing before him, the young man in black remained speechless. Lin Feng was slowly walking towards Lu Fei. When he passed the young man in black, it seemed like he didn't intend to take notice of him at all. However, Lin Feng simply walked past him and with his back facing the young man in black, he said, "Asshole." The young man in black could feel his hatred boiling inside his heart. His heart was filled with wrath and hatred. Lin Feng was humiliating him too much, not even looking at him and insulting him like that. He wanted to kill Lin Feng but he didn't dare attack him. He knew that he wasn't strong enough. He was just hoping that Cui Ting would be able to do it for him. "Bastard. I will make you pay for your 100 days' worth of crimes," said Lu Fei to Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't know what she had gone through. Her eyes were filled with hatred and suffering. Lin Feng looked at Lu Fei with a wry smile on his face. He hadn't never thought that the young man in black would be so shameless. Lin Feng stretched out his hand and gently caressed Lu Fei's face. He wanted to let her know that everything would be alright now he was here. When Lu Fei felt Lin Feng's hand on her face, she felt her legs go weak and she had slightly lost her balance. Lin Feng was being so tender and affectionate towards her. The sadness and anger she was feeling suddenly were replaced by tender warmth. Lu Fei's mother had died when she was still young. Her father had been fighting in every corner of the country and didn't have time to take care of her. At that moment, she thought that Lin Feng was being incredibly gentle and caring towards her. She felt the warmth she had been longing for, her whole life. "I'll handle this myself," said Lin Feng to Lu Fei, who was feeling nervous at the current situation. She quickly started to rearrange her messy hair when she realized what she must have looked like. Lin Feng smiled and immediately turned around. The warm smile on his face suddenly vanished and was replaced with a piercingly cold glare. This guy is strong, thought Cui Ting while looking at Lin Feng. He then moved closer to the young man in black. He wanted to prevent him from fighting against Lin Feng, whose face was filled with killing intent. I don't really enjoy dirtying my sword with the blood of people like you, but since you have insisted, you will be the first person I kill at the Celestial Academy. At that moment, Lin Feng slowly unsheathed his soft sword. It was diffusing a sharp silver glow. When the young man in black heard Lin Feng, he was terrified and started moving backwards. He then hid behind Cui Ting. What a pathetic little boy. You're truly a piece of shit, said Lu Fei to the young man in black when she saw that he was hiding behind Cui Ting. How had the situation become like this? He had been harassing Lu Fei, thinking that it was Lin Feng for 3 months, and he tried to humiliate Lu Fei to make Lin Feng angry, but now that Lin Feng had arrived, he was scared to death. When he heard Lu Fei's words, he felt extremely humiliated but didn't reply. He hated his own actions as well. Why was he so scared when in front of Lin Feng? You cannot kill him, said Cui Ting, who was standing in front of the young man with black. He will die, said Lin Feng, taking a step forward. He released an incredible amount of sword force which created whirlwinds in the air, accompanied by whistling sounds as it pierced the atmosphere. The sword force was also filled with an extreme cold. Sword force. Cui Ting's pupils shrank. Not only was that guy using sword force, but the young man in black had been wrong. He had said that Lin Feng was of the 3rd Ling Qi layer, but it seemed like he was at least the 4th Ling Qi layer. What a piece of trash, thought Cui Ting about the young man in black. He was still very confident in his abilities as people who could defeat him were not numerous, but he knew that it didn't mean he was invincible. Cui Ting didn't feel like fighting against a cultivator of the 4th Ling Qi layer who could use sword force. He was sure that he had no chance of coming out alive if he was to fight against Lin Feng. The difference in power between a cultivator of the 4th Ling Qi layer who could use sword force and one who couldn't was too huge. Get lost. Lin Feng, who was dragging the tip of his soft sword against the solid tower floor, which diffused a sharp metallic noise. He looked extremely murderous at this moment. Cui Ting could feel that the sword force was growing even more intense. He was persuaded that he wouldn't be able to fight against Lin Feng. Lin Feng had released such an incredible amount of sword force already. He was terrified and wondering how a cultivator of the 4th Ling Qi layer could already control so much force to perfection. I am not as strong as you and I cannot protect him. But you still cannot kill him, said Cui Ting, remaining motionless. He was nervously staring at Lin Feng. The young man in black was stupefied. Cui Ting was unable to protect him. He wasn't as strong as him. The young man in black was furious. Today, nobody can save him, said Lin Feng while a freezing qi emerged from his body. He stepped forward and thrust his sword through the air. Cui Ting, when he felt the power of the attack, he couldn't help but sigh. Cui Ting immediately moved aside. He knew that he would never be able to resist the power of that attack, so the only thing he could do was dodge. Even though Hei Mo wouldn't agree, Cui Ting also knew that Hei Mo wouldn't want both of them die together, especially if he knew what the situation was so dire. He probably wouldn't blame him for dodging such a powerful attack. Cui Ting moved aside and the young man in black was at the mercy of Lin Feng's sword. The young man in black had the feeling that his death was growing closer. When the young man in black felt Lin Feng's cold qi moving towards him, he couldn't help but shiver. Cold sweat was flowing down his back. When the young man in black felt Lin Feng's cold qi moving towards him, he couldn't help but shiver. Cold sweat was flowing down his back. This is the Celestial Academy, students can fight but they cannot kill, said the young man in black. He felt like he was about to faint. He was scared to death. I know, said Lin Feng coldly. The young man in black felt some relief on hearing this. It gave him hope. But I also know that it is forbidden to disturb other people while they are in a cultivation room, and what have you been doing for the last 3 months, said Lin Feng, which made the young man in black fall back into his panicked state. I admit that I violated the rules, but the consequences are not important when compared with killing a student. Killing a student is completely different. Are you trying to scare me? Said Lin Feng. The young man in black was growing more terrified with each passing moment. His forehead was covered with sweat. Besides, the consequences are not important, said Lin Feng while glancing at the poor and exhausted Lu Fei. He then added, well, that's your opinion. As I see it, the consequences of you having harassed her for 3 months are much more serious than taking your pathetic life. You cannot kill him, repeated Cui Ting, which attracted Lin Feng's attention. Lin Feng slightly turned around and looked at him. You cannot kill him, otherwise, you'll regret it, said Cui Ting. I'm sorry, I'll have to disappoint you. I never regret anything that I do. Lin Feng's hand continued to move and Cui Ting quickly shouted, wait. Do you have anything else to add? Said Lin Feng. He is Hei Mo's little brother. If you kill him, Hei Mo will never let you off. Hemo, said some people who had come over to see what was happening. They were stupefied. He was surprisingly Hei Mo's brother. Yuan Shan was in the crowd as well and was stupefied like everybody else. He had also heard about Hei Mo, Lin Feng. Hei Mo is one of the 10 best students of the Celestial Academy. He almost never practices here, and when he does, it's on the ground floor, warned Yuan Shan from the middle of the crowd. Indeed, Hei Mo wasn't someone one wanted to fight. A light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. The young man in black looked like he was relieved. Indeed, I'm Hei Mo's little brother. If you kill me, he will definitely kill you, said the young man in black proudly. Moron, said Lin Feng when he heard the young man's threat. He raised his sword and then carefully slit the young man's throat from ear to ear. At that moment, everyone was completely stunned and shaking in fear. Nobody had thought that Lin Feng, after hearing that he was related to Hei Mo, would actually dare to kill his little brother without the slightest hesitation. The young man in black hadn't thought that his death would come so quickly. At the moment when Lin Feng's sword penetrated his throat, he was still hoping that Lin Feng would retreat on hearing his brother's name. His last thought was that he hated himself for acting so foolishly. He hated himself for having provoked Lin Feng. He didn't hate Lin Feng to such an extent, and Lin Feng didn't hate him. There was no great enmity between them until he had caused it. He had thought that dying for what had happened was too grave a punishment, and he truly felt that Lin Feng wouldn't do it. He had been stupid until the end. What a cruel and heartless person, sighed Cui Ting. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng would kill him. After hearing about Hei Mo, Lin Feng took out a rag and wiped the blade of his sword. Then, he put it back in its sheath and looked at Cui Ting. If he hadn't been Hei Mo's brother, he would have never dared to be that audacious and violate the rules of the academy, am I right? Said Lin Feng coldly, pointing at the young man's corpse lying on the floor. Cui Ting was surprised and then nodded. Without Hei Mo's reputation, the young man in black would never have behaved in such a way. Therefore, the one who caused this is actually Hei Mo, so it was actually Hei Mo who broke the rules of the academy. Because of him, my friend was constantly harassed day and night for 100 days, but Hei Mo will not bear the responsibility for that, am I right? Said Lin Feng. Cui Ting suddenly came to a realization. He now understood why Lin Feng had actually killed the young man in black. It was not that Lin Feng hadn't thought about Hei Mo when killing his little brother, it was actually the exact opposite. Lin Feng just didn't think of Hei Mo as someone above the rules, he only thought that because of him, Lu Fei had been harassed for 100 days without rest. That's why he killed the young man in black. It was a warning. He wanted to tell everyone in the academy that anyone who assaulted him or his friends would pay with their life. Let's go, said Lin Feng to Lu Fei. Lu Fei, Yuan Shan and Jing Yun all started leaving with Lin Feng. Cui Ting and the young man's dead body were just left behind as they walked away. "What's your name?" asked Cui Ting. "Lin Feng," replied Lin Feng as he walked away. "Lin Feng," whispered Cui Ting, he would make sure to remember that name. The rest of the crowd also took note of his name. Who could forget the name of someone who had dared to provoke Hei Mo? After Lin Feng and the others left, the 10th floor was still filled with people. There were more and more people gathering at the location. There was a corpse on the 10th floor. Surprisingly, there was someone who had dared to kill someone in the cultivation tower. They didn't know who could be so audacious. At that moment, an evil-looking young man was walking towards the 10th floor. The evil-looking young man arrived on the 10th floor and looked at the corpse on the ground. His facial expression didn't change. He still looked incredibly calm as he looked at the scene. The crowd who was surrounding that evil-looking young man backed away from him and made sure to give him enough space. They were looking at him as if he was a deity walking amongst them. It was Hei Mo who had climbed the tower looking for his little brother. "Who killed him?" asked Hei Mo with an indifferent tone. He even looked calm, which scared the crowd to death. "Lin Feng," replied Cui Ting and then added, "He's much too strong for me to fight against." Hei Mo remained silent and looked at the corpse. He then said, "Make him come to my clan, and double-check his name. Make sure you got the name correct." When Hei Mo finished talking, he turned around and slowly walked towards the flight of stairs. He then left the tower without another word. When Lin Feng and the others arrived in the palace where they lived, he let out a deep sigh and got ready to go back to his living quarters. "Don't get too impatient to go and find the other one," said a quiet voice next to him. Lin Feng was surprised. What was said sounded incredibly strange. Lin Feng had a strange smile on his face as he looked at Lu Fei with a blank expression. "Are you angry?" asked Lin Feng while smiling and gazing deeply into her eyes. "Why would I be angry?" replied Lu Fei coldly while avoiding Lin Feng's eyes. Lin Feng had a smile on the corner of his mouth and said, "Since you are not angry, why can I feel that there is bitterness in your voice?" "Maybe because you have dirty ears and can't hear properly," replied Lu Fei. What was that guy's problem staring at her like that? "Is that so?" said Lin Feng while scratching his head. He then smiled and said, "We just came back from training, obviously we would go back to our respective living quarters, and you seem to think that it is because I was impatient to see Meng Qing. Could it be that you want me to come to your room?" "Stop dreaming," said Lu Fei while stamping her feet. That guy really had mental problems. She then immediately left and went straight to her room. Lin Feng looked at Lu Fei and smiled. Even though she was often in a bad mood, she was really adorable and cute when she hid her feelings like that. Lin Feng didn't rush back to his room within his living quarters and rather knocked at Meng Qing's door. "Come in," said Meng Qing coldly. Lin Feng immediately entered. He saw Meng Qing who was sitting on the bed. She said, "Oh, you came back." Meng Qing hadn't covered her face with her fine veil. Her entire face was visible to Lin Feng, which made him sigh with exasperation. How could the creator of all things create such an unrivaled beauty? That was too cruel. In the previous world, even the richest man in the world would have given up his entire fortune for this beauty, thought Lin Feng. While in his presence, Meng Qing wasn't as cold as before. If he could make her smile once every day, then he would have a wonderful life. "What happened on that day? Has it happened again?" asked Lin Feng calmly while walking towards Meng Qing's bed. Meng Qing looked at Lin Feng, slightly shook her hand and said softly, "Have I not told you about this? It happens every 6 months. Once every 6 months. Poor Meng Qing, having to go through such hellish torture every 6 months. Why did she have to endure such horror? Once every 6 months. Poor Meng Qing, having to go through such hellish torture every 6 months. Why did she have to endure such horror? If it happens again in the future, you must tell me. I can help you. I don't want you to suffer like this," Now that I am here, said Lin Feng to Meng Qing. His snake spirit could swallow all the cold qi. Besides, his snake would grow stronger the more qi it consumed. His snake spirit was so mysterious, eating the qi of others was not something which normally occurred. You haven't told me yet what really happened on that day, said Meng Qing while staring at Lin Feng. She had suffered from exhaustion and had fallen sound asleep on Lin Feng's chest. It was such an embarrassing moment that she had forgotten what had happened before that. Well, you first tell me where that cold qi comes from, said Lin Feng. I was born with it, replied Meng Qing, which surprised Lin Feng. She was born with it. Lin Feng had already heard that some people were sometimes born with diseases or natural abilities, but Meng Qing's one was horrible. Now, you tell me, said Meng Qing. Lin Feng smiled. He then released his snake spirit appeared behind his back. The little snake had already become a huge snake. It curled up on Lin Feng's shoulders, its eyes made it look like a real snake rather than a spirit. Its two eyes were staring deeply at Meng Qing. Huh? Meng Qing was stupefied when she saw the snake. She looked incredibly anxious. It's my spirit, I still don't know what kind of snake it is. It swallowed all of the cold qi that you released last time and gave me the power of that qi, said Lin Feng. Meng Qing looked stunned and she was blankly staring at Lin Feng's snake spirit. But very quickly, she looked as cold and indifferent as always. Meng Qing then slightly nodded and said, no wonder, it's an extremely strong spirit. Lin Feng slightly nodded while looking deep in thought and said, it should be a snake spirit but it is not clear to me yet what kind of snake it is. You'll know at some point, replied Meng Qing. I hope so, replied Lin Feng while nodding and said, I am going to head back, if you need anything in the future then come and get me right away. Meng Qing nodded. Lin Feng stood up and then put his hand on Meng Qing's head. He caressed her hair for a few seconds which made her body slightly tremble. Lin Feng turned around and left. Meng Qing looked at Lin Feng's back and frowned. That's a snake spirit, whispered Meng Qing. She had the sensation that it was a beast spirit but not necessarily a snake spirit. She knew there was something special but couldn't describe what it was. There was a spirit which strangely looked like Lin Feng's spirit but it had 9 heads, and it wasn't a beast spirit but a dragon spirit. It was early in the morning and there was not a single cloud over what seemed to be a boundless area. In the Celestial Academy, there were a lot of people gossiping about recent events. It seemed like most of the people were mentioning the same words very often in their conversations, Cultivation Tower and Hei Mo. At that moment, 2 people were walking on the biggest road of the Celestial Academy and were talking amongst themselves. I heard that his name is Lin Feng. At the registration day, he humiliated 2 students of the academy, Zhuo Qiu and Bai Zhe. His goal was to make the wealthy and noble cultivators lose face, said one of them. The news of what had happened at the Cultivation Tower was already widely spread in the academy because Lin Feng had broken the rules and killed one of the students. The news was spreading at the speed of light, not only because Lin Feng had broken the rules but also because it has to do with one of the best students of the academy, Hei Mo. Any rumor relating to the 10 best students of the academy spread quickly. Even though Hei Mo wasn't at the top in the ranking, he was still extremely powerful. Who told you about what happened at the registration day? He must be quite proud and arrogant if he humiliated the wealthy and noble students, but this time he has made a big mistake. I mean, Cui Ting had already warned him that he was Hei Mo's little brother. He surprisingly still dared to kill him. That's a humiliation for Hei Mo. Lin Feng will definitely regret what he did. He could never think of defeating Hei Mo. You're right. One of the 10 best students in the academy. Lin Feng has run out of luck, said the other person in the same tone as if they were proud of their analysis of the situation. At the same time in a distant location, 2 silhouettes were drawing a crowd of people's attention. Suddenly, many people gathered and started following the silhouettes. These people were about 100 meters away from the 2 people discussing. When the 2 people who were discussing saw one of the silhouettes in the crowd, they couldn't help but be stupefied. Hei Mo. Hei Mo was surprisingly in the crowd. There are so many people, something must be going on, said the two people who were looking at them. Hei Mo wasn't walking fast but he looked determined. Not so long after, they arrived near the palace where the first category students were living. At that moment, a silhouette was slowly coming out of the palace. Oh no! Lin Feng, that's the guy from the cultivation tower, said Yuan Shan when he saw the crowd coming towards them. Cui Ting was walking next to an evil-looking young man. Yuan Shan obviously remembered him from the events at the tower. Lin Feng didn't stop walking. Immediately after, the two sides were facing each other. Lin Feng first saw Cui Ting and then slowly turned his head towards the evil-looking young man. He then said, "Hei Mo, I presume." Hei Mo coldly looked at Lin Feng and then glanced at Wen Ao Shui, ignoring Lin Feng. "I want his life," said Hei Mo indifferently, looking incredibly calm. But he wasn't talking to Lin Feng as Lin Feng's life was protected by Wen Ao Shui. Wen Ao Shui just smiled with his incredibly beautiful face, which made him look like a beautiful girl. He then calmly shook his head and said, "He's my friend. This is a problem now. In the cultivation tower, he killed my little brother after hearing my name. He made me lose face. You shouldn't get involved in this matter," said Hei Mo, who, strangely, wasn't discussing that matter with Lin Feng but with Wen Ao Shui. Lin Feng had a strange look in his eyes as he was staring at Wen Ao Shui. Wen Ao Shui, who was more beautiful than some girls, was probably an extremely talented individual. "Well, I heard that your little brother broke the rules of the academy first and then, because he was too weak, went and asked other people to help him. The result is that he died. The only thing to blame is his own weakness. He can only blame his own weakness, but Lin Feng is still new here, he only recently joined the academy. After such a short time he has made many people lose face. He also humiliated me. He must die, don't you agree?" said Hei Mo, which stupefied everybody. Hei Mo wanted to kill Lin Feng, not because Lin Feng had killed his little brother, but because Lin Feng had humiliated him when he killed his brother after hearing Hei Mo's name. In other words, even though Lin Feng had heard Hei Mo's name and his reputation, he had still dared to kill his little brother. Hei Mo only wanted to kill him to save face and nothing more. For these kinds of people, face was the most important thing in their life, it was even more important than Lin Feng's life. You also know that he's new here, so would you, Hei Mo, dare to threaten a new student? Wouldn't you be ashamed and lose face? He has committed crimes which he must be punished for, and the only price to pay is his life, said Hei Mo, who ignored Wen Ao Shui's words. He then said coldly and indifferently, "You can protect him now, but I don't think that you are going to stay with him forever. If you are not with him at some point, I will easily kill him. Who could stop me?" When he finished talking, he stopped looking at Wen Ao Shui and looked at Lin Feng. "You are indeed very smart and you must be very happy about how things have played out. You're a smart little boy, but have you ever thought that your actions have led to your own death?" said Hei Mo coldly and then added, "Or do you really think that you can hide behind Wen Ao Shui your entire life?" "Are you done talking?" said Lin Feng coldly to Hei Mo when he saw that the latter wouldn't stop talking. Lin Feng's face was expressionless, as if one of the 10 best students of the academy was unable to make him feel scared or anxious. When Hei Mo heard what Lin Feng said, he smiled coldly. His smile was as sharp as a blade. He then said, "I have finished talking, now what?" "Now what? Now what?" Lin Feng nodded and said coldly, "Now, if you're done talking, I also have a few things to tell you. Your little brother was a piece of trash. He did not have other people in his eyes. He attempted to steal my cultivation room, so I had to make him leave, but because he was your little brother, he thought that he was invincible. He then broke the rule of the academy and harassed my friend every single day for 3 months with your help. He humiliated her and hindered her training. Was I wrong to kill him?" said Lin Feng while looking at Hei Mo. "You killed him, you were indeed in the right, But, said Hei Mo, who wanted to keep talking but was interrupted by Lin Feng, you already said that you have finished talking, so please, shut up. Huh, the crowd was stupefied. That guy was really aggressive and suddenly dared to tell Hei Mo to shut up. He only thought that he could behave like this because when Ao Shui was next to him. Hei Mo was stupefied but immediately said, alright, continue. You also said it yourself, I was right to kill him. Your little brother broke the rules of the academy, it was obviously because you had allowed him to do so. So because you allowed your little brother to attempt to humiliate me, you have indirectly caused me to lose face. When he wanted to kill me, you were happy to provide your support. So first you have made me lose face and then you're getting angry because you lost face when things did not go as planned. Could it be that you are so stupid that you think I would willingly lose face to you because you are strong, said Lin Feng with a strict tone, making the whole crowd stupefied yet again. That's right. These types of people could only see things from their perspective and couldn't understand other people's point of view. Even if what you say is true, then what? Said Hei Mo with a detached tone. No, then what? I've met many people who thought they were above the rest of the world. I have always shown them how foolish and ridiculous they are, said Lin Feng coldly. He then continued, you must think that I am only saying this because when Ao Shui is here. However, whether when Ao Shui was here or not, you do not have the required power to kill me. Don't try and refute what I am saying. You are free to try and kill me at any time and you will see what happens when you make an attempt on my life. Just like you said, when someone commits a crime there must be punishment, and sometimes the price is your life, said Lin Feng, who sounded incredibly threatening. Some people in the crowd frowned. Not only was Lin Feng saying that whether when Ao Shui was there or not, Hei Mo couldn't kill him, but he was also saying that Hei Mo might even die for attempting it. But Yuan Shan had no doubts concerning what Lin Feng had just said. He knew about the mysterious girl protecting Lin Feng. He had seen her power firsthand. Hei Mo was stupefied and said coldly, you have a very high opinion about yourself. I have never had a high opinion about myself, and I have also never been arrogant or thought that I was above anyone else. I'm not like you who dares to talk about others' lives as if they were already within my hands. Isn't that itself extremely arrogant? Do you think that you stand high above everyone else in the world? I would like to ask you a question, what chi layer have you broken through to? Arrogant? High above the rest of the world. Hei Mo smiled coldly and said, I could hold you between my 2 fingers and easily kill you. I have broken through to the 6th Ling Chi layer, and you dare be that arrogant. You are ridiculous. You must be joking, interrupted Lin Feng while laughing loudly. He then said, you have only broken through to the 6th Ling Chi layer and you dare to speak about that as if you were one of the best cultivators in the world. Even saying that you could hold me between your fingers and kill me. You must be joking. Having broken through to the 6th Ling Chi layer is nothing extraordinary. How ridiculous. The world is huge, there are millions and millions of geniuses, and you dare talk about yourself as if you are special and others are beneath you. I want to tell you something, you are a little mouse who can only see an inch. What powerful words. What sharp arguments. Said some of the people within the crowd while looking at Hei Mo, who was being verbally harassed by Lin Feng. Hei Mo had indeed only broken through to the 6th Ling Chi layer, which wasn't considered as an extremely strong cultivator in the outside world, but in the academy, nobody would provoke him. Almost nobody could defeat him. Even some students of the 7th Chi layer wouldn't want to fight against him. But, saying that the 6th Ling Chi layer was already amazingly high on the path of cultivation was obviously an exaggeration. His heart was as ugly as his personality. Lin Feng stopped for a few seconds and continued, of course, you probably think that you are amazing because you are amongst the 10 best students of the academy, but you are a tiny insignificant person in the world of cultivation. So now I want to ask, in 3 months' time I want to challenge you to a life and death battle, do you dare to accept? Said Lin Feng. The entire crowd was astonished. Lin Feng actually dared challenge one of the 10 best students of the academy, Hei Mo. He even dared to challenge him to a life-and-death battle. Lin Feng had just joined the academy, he didn't know what he was doing. He definitely doesn't know how powerful Hei Mo is. That little boy is bringing about his own destruction. He has gone insane. The crowd was making various comments about Lin Feng. Nobody believed that Lin Feng could win. They all thought that he was acting recklessly and had lost his sense of reason. Even Lin Feng's friends were astonished and didn't believe what he had just said. They knew that Lin Feng was strong, but he would definitely never be able to defeat Hei Mo. That was insanity. When Ao Shui was looking at Lin Feng, it was obvious from his face that he didn't think Lin Feng could ever win the battle. Of course, Lin Feng was humiliating Hei Mo by challenging him. A student who had just joined the academy had humiliated his brother, humiliated him a few times and was then challenging him to a life-and-death battle. He had completely lost all face. Hei Mo was sure that everything that was happening would eventually spread through the academy and he knew that the other ranked students would soon hear about it. At that moment, Hei Mo's evil face looked even more evil and sinister. He had burning flames in his eyes. He looked hideously terrifying. "Do you think that you have completely lost all face?" asked Lin Feng while smiling. He then said, "You are losing face again, but what about me? Especially since you have brought so many people with you. Have you never thought that I would lose face too? So, you don't need to look at me that way. If you want to regain your reputation, I will see you in 3 months. Show everybody that you, Hei Mo, can afford being arrogant because you truly are an amazing cultivator." Hei Mo looked furious, he looked at Lin Feng and said, "In 3 months, you will understand how pitiful and pathetic you really are." When he finished talking, Hei Mo turned around and left. The entire crowd was astonished. Hei Mo had accepted the challenge. 3 months later, he would make Lin Feng regret that challenge forever. The crowd first looked at Hei Mo's back in the distance and then looked at Lin Feng again. They were terribly excited and couldn't wait to see that battle. How could Lin Feng have challenged him to such a battle? What strength did he rely on to dare and challenge him to a life-and-death battle? In 3 months' time, Hei Mo would be much stronger and would regain his lost face. 3 months would pass very quickly. It was not a very long time in the world of cultivation. "Let's go," said Lin Feng looking at his friends. They then started walking towards the exit of the academy. When Ao Shui looked at Lin Feng and said, "Hei Mo is at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer. Even some students of the 7th Ling Qi layer don't dare to challenge him to a battle. Almost nobody can defeat him in the academy, and what level are you? The 4th or the 5th Ling Qi layer, you could never defeat him. Besides, Hei Mo is at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer and will soon break through. It will be extremely hard for you to defeat as he is now let alone when he advances." Lin Feng smiled. He obviously knew that it wouldn't be easy. He then said in a detached tone, "I needed to quickly become stronger than anyone else." When Ao Shui nodded. He didn't really understand what Lin Feng meant. What did that have to do with Hei Mo? Lin Feng saw when Ao Shui's facial expression and said, "Strength often comes when you are in danger. You have to risk your life to quickly become stronger." When he heard Lin Feng, when Ao Shui was stunned. Risk one's life to become stronger. Lin Feng was an extremely scary individual. Everybody in the academy quickly learned that Lin Feng had challenged Hei Mo to a life-and-death battle. Everybody in the academy quickly learned that Lin Feng had challenged Hei Mo to a life-and-death battle. The military students were not the only ones who had heard the news, but people who were studying political strategies as well as the assassin students had also heard about it. People were starting to pay attention to Lin Feng. Who exactly was he? He had appeared from nowhere and had been accepted in the academy with all the privileges but without the disadvantages. The vice principal personally went to invite him. Why? As people were trying to understand who Lin Feng really was, they were stupefied to see that the pieces of information they found about him were contradictory. It seemed like Lin Feng had a high status in society, but then again it seemed like he was of a low social class, and it was like that for all the information which could be found. There were many contradictions when it came to him, as if he had been artificially created and as if someone was trying to make everybody confused to what his real identity was. If it was really the result of someone's external actions, that would be truly terrifying. That would be like delegating all the power to Lin Feng. But Lin Feng knew nothing about these things that were happening. Yuan Shan and Wen Ao Shui were not at the academy. At that moment, there was a huge wall was in front of them. That huge wall was surrounding a small town. That was a small town within the imperial city. The wall in front of their eyes was so wide that they had the impression that it was endless. "Let's go inside," said Wen Ao Shui to the others. They started walking towards the big gate of the small city. "Please let us be on our way," said Wen Ao Shui while handing a purity stone to the entrance guards. Surprisingly, it was a purity stone of medium quality. Besides, Lin Feng noticed that it wasn't only Wen Ao Shui who had to pay a tax but everyone who wanted to enter. Very quickly, a sea of faces appeared in front Lin Feng and the others. The colorful market was vast and bustling. "What's this?" Lin Feng's pupils shrank. The scene reminded Lin Feng of an antique market. "This is the busiest part of the imperial city. Whatever you need or whatever you want to do, you can come here and you'll find it. Everything is possible here," explained Wen Ao Shui to Lin Feng. Lu Fei, who was standing next to Lin Feng, seemed excited and said, "I've already heard about that place but I've never come here before. It seems even more lively than I had imagined. No wonder that the imperial city is so wealthy, I now understand why." Lin Feng nodded and Wen Ao Shui was smiling. "Lin Feng, you can find many beautiful women here with whom you can have lots of fun," said Wen Ao Shui with a smile on his face. Lin Feng was stunned and Lu Fei looked furious. Lu Fei's look made Lin Feng shiver. He tried to smile but it looked incredibly awkward. Why had Wen Ao Shui said such a thing? Besides, you can come to this district very easily as long as you have enough purity stones. You can buy weapons and even people, for example you can get pure virgins here as well as slaves. You can also find some really valuable martial skills and agility techniques, said Wen Ao Shui. Lin Feng was stupefied. Weapons, women, slaves, skills and techniques. Nobody could resist to the temptation of obtaining such things. No wonder that this place was so full of people. So as long as one had enough purity stones, one could get almost anything they wanted here. There was nothing that was not for sale here. We should come to the market district all the time, thought Lin Feng. Amongst the things that Wen Ao Shui had listed, Lin Feng was interested in many of them. For example, slaves. Of course, a true cultivator wouldn't go the first place I spoke about, where you can go to enjoy women. Only wealthy yet degenerated and depraved people go to such places. Genuine cultivators go to other districts. One is the market district and the other one is a place where the military students of our academy always go, said Wen Ao Shui and then stopped, keeping Lin Feng in suspense. What district? Asked Lin Feng, who was obviously very curious. What is the place where the military students of the academy always go? A place full of people, which is often a horrible place where one's mind cannot be at peace, but such a place is a place to train and gain experience. It's a battle arena. You're talking about prisoner arena, suddenly said Lu Fei. Indeed, it is precisely the prisoner arena. It is such a crazy place that even some military students of our academy don't dare to go there, said Wen Ao Shui and then added, Lin Feng, that place would be perfect for you. If you want to quickly become stronger, then this is the place to go. Prisoner arena, whispered Lin Feng. He then asked, what kind of place is the prisoner arena? The prisoner arena? Well, you have to go and see for yourself, said Wen Ao Shui while laughing. They immediately started walking. Lin Feng was extremely curious at what this battle arena would be like. The marketplace was like a city within the city. It was extremely vast and there was no end in sight. They were walking fast, but even after half an hour had passed, they still hadn't reached the prisoner arena. But at that moment Lin Feng heard a multitude of voices. Suddenly, in front of him, there was a huge gathering of people. He could only see their backs but couldn't see what they were looking at. Lin Feng and his friends started to move closer to look at what was happening. The sounds of the voices were getting louder and louder. That place was huge and shaped like a ring. It was gigantic. In the middle of that gigantic ring-shaped stadium, there were multiple different craters. All of them had flights of stairs to go down or come back up. Lin Feng, this is the prisoner arena. As you can see, there are hundreds of thousands of people within the arena. It's like this every day, all day, said Wen Ao Shui, pointing at the sea of people. Hundreds of thousands of people, said Lin Feng, amazed. That was a huge amount. Besides, it was like that every single day. It was almost oppressive and actually hard to imagine. They then moved down the stairs and looked at the crowd in the distance. The crater was so deep that it looked like a gorge, and there were many viewing platforms. In the middle of the canyon, there was a huge silver cage full of silhouettes. Prisoners. Lin Feng progressively understood why that place was called the prisoner arena. It reminded him of the previous world in ancient Rome, where aristocrats used to watch slaves and wild beasts fight in the Colosseum. But the scene before Lin Feng's eyes at that moment was much more impressive. It made him shiver from head to toe, as if his soul was shaking with excitement. In that cage, there is a battle every day, either a cultivator versus a ferocious beast or a cultivator versus another cultivator, and the only way to be freed is to kill the opponent during your battle, said Wen Ao Shui to Lin Feng. That was a terrifying premise. No wonder some people had chosen to keep their distance from this place. Every battle resulted in the death of either a cultivator or a ferocious beast. Every year, some students of our academy die here. The number of corpses is always increasing, said Wen Ao Shui while looking at the gigantic cage. He then slowly said, there are only the strongest and the most courageous cultivators who would dare to go in there. They are true fighters, because in that cage, the conditions are the same as on a real battlefield. In the middle of that cage, the winners live on and the losers die. In the middle of that cage, the winners live on and the losers die. It was indeed like on a battlefield. In the continent of the 9 clouds, cultivators were respected and admired. Cultivators took cultivation very seriously, as it was a way of life. That is why they didn't hesitate to risk their lives to improve their cultivation abilities. The path of cultivation was full of personal challenges, and determination was the key to success. What are the rules of the prisoner arena? Asked Lin Feng. The one in charge of the cage declares who will fight against whom. Of course, he always matches people with other cultivators or ferocious beasts of a similar level, otherwise the battles would be meaningless slaughter, explained Wen Ao Shui. Lin Feng slightly nodded. If one wasn't assigned to fight against someone of the same level, many people wouldn't dare to enter the cage at the risk of fighting someone much stronger. By the way, if you lose a battle in the cage, then death is inevitable, but if you win, you can get a massive amount of purity stones. That is why many of our fellow disciples come here to fight and then go back to the cultivation tower at the academy, use their purity stones and come back here again, etc. That enables them to boost their cultivation speed to the extreme. Of course, it is also extremely dangerous. Challenging death over and over again is, indeed, often the best way to become stronger. In dangerous situation, death and fortune coexist, said Wen Ao Shui, sounding solemn. Lin Feng was stupefied. Wen Ao Shui sounded like he often visited this place. It was hard to imagine that this boy would go to such a place when looking at his beautiful girl-like face. They were still walking, and at the same time Lin Feng could clearly see the inside of the cage from where he was. The inside of the cage was incredibly huge, and the cage which covered it looked like it had fallen down straight from the heavens and trapped the people inside. Inside the cage was divided into 2, one side was for cultivator versus cultivator battles while the other side was dedicated to fights between cultivators and ferocious beasts. The two sides were separated by viewing platforms. People were free to choose what kind of battle they wished to watch. At that moment, a group of silhouettes in front of Lin Feng turned around and looked at them. As if when Ao Shui had expected it for a long time, he took out 6 purity stones of medium quality out of his pocket and handed them over to the man who moved aside and let them pass. The price for the 10 first rows is quite expensive, but they are also the best place to clearly watch the battles, said Wen Ao Shui. Lin Feng was stunned. 1 purity stone of medium quality per person? That's horribly expensive. Way too expensive. 1 purity stone of medium quality was enough to practice 1 month in the cultivation tower of the Celestial Academy, from the 4th to the 10th floor. That wasn't a low price. No, it's not expensive at all. It's even cheap. Think for a while, what kinds of people will come here and sit on the best rows on the viewing platforms, said Wen Ao Shui while shaking his head. Those who wanted to enter in the cage to fight and the wealthy who already had a lot of purity stones to begin with, said Lin Feng. You're right. Besides, if they win a battle within the cage then they will win at least 10 purity stones of medium quality. If they lose, they will not need any purity stones anymore as they will be dead, said Wen Ao Shui. He then pointed at the 3rd row of the viewing platform and said, let's sit there. Alright, said Lin Feng while nodding. There weren't so many people sitting in the first 10 rows. After all, those who wanted to enter the cage as well as those who had enough purity stones to waste were hard to find. When Lin Feng sat down, a battle had just finished. Inside of the cage, one of the slaves inserted his hand into the chest of his opponent and ripped out his heart. The scene was sanguinary and bestial. Blood was dripping everywhere as the slave held the heart high in the air. But the crowd was used to watching such spectacles. They suddenly started shouting in excitement when they saw the scene unfolding. Lu Fei and Jing Yun frowned, they felt nauseous. Lin Feng looked calm but on the inside he also felt slightly grieved while watching the scene. In that world, there was no space for the weak. The weak were worthless and could be disposed of. This was something Lin Feng was still trying to adapt to. If you are not entirely confident in your own abilities then it is useless to enter the cage, thought Lin Feng while shaking his head. Lin Feng, considering your opponent would be of the same level as you, would you prefer fighting against a ferocious beast or a cultivator? Asked Wen Ao Shui who was extremely curious. Ferocious beast, replied Lin Feng without hesitation. Wen Ao Shui was surprised by Lin Feng's answer but smiled and immediately replied, you're right. Many people think that, if the opponent is of the same level, a ferocious beast would be stronger than a cultivator but it is not the same in the cage. A cultivation slave doesn't know when he'll die. Cultivation slaves are even more cruel and sanguinary than the ferocious beasts. They are even more terrifying than the monsters of nightmares. Sometimes, you may think that you are stronger than your opponent but in the cage, it's different, you think that you're stronger but you might not necessarily be the last one standing in the end. To stay alive, some people were ready to do anything. Lin Feng shook his head and said, you're right but my choice to fight against a ferocious beast has nothing to do with that. What? Really? Asked Wen Ao Shui very surprised. Really? Replied Lin Feng and then added, cultivation slaves might be slaves, but after all, they are still people who deserve the basic human rights and to me they are still innocent people who have not provoked me. Wen Ao Shui was surprised by Lin Feng's reply and had a strange expression on his face. You think that the cultivation slaves are extremely cruel and heartless but if they kill those who enter the cage, it is only because their lives are really threatened, and the worst is those who enter the cage and fight these cultivation slaves to the death do it for only a few purity stones. As far as I am concerned, I couldn't kill anyone if I didn't hate them for something they have done to me or my friends. Otherwise, I would have a very guilty conscience. Lin Feng didn't think that he was a good person or that he could save the world alone but there were certain moral values and principles which were engraved into his heart and he would live by them. On the path of cultivation, Lin Feng thought virtue was just as important as determination. After hearing Lin Feng's words, it was the first time that when Ao Shui had felt that there was something wrong with this place. Even though these people were cultivation slaves, they were still people. They were people, but in this world, few people felt compassion like Lin Feng. After being born into this environment, it has shaped many people to be just as brutal and bloodthirsty as the world around them. The great majority of people only had the goal to become stronger, no matter what the cost. For that purpose, they unscrupulously killed other people. Killing people was a normal thing for them. You may be right. In the future, I will only battle against ferocious beasts, said Wen Ao Shui while smiling. At that moment, a voice came from behind them. Military students, since when did you start disliking the state of the world and adopt a compassionate tone? How ridiculous. When Ao Shui and Lin Feng turned around and saw a group of people wearing magnificent clothes. They looked extremely arrogant. Political students. Lin Feng frowned. Amongst them, Lin Feng recognized a fellow student. He had already slapped him once. Bai Zhe. At the Celestial Academy, people who studied military tactics and those who studied governmental affairs were usually not on good terms. There had always been tensions between the two categories of students. At the Celestial Academy, people who studied military tactics and those who studied governmental affairs were usually not on good terms. There had always been tensions between the two categories of students. Not only military students liked to come to the prisoner arena, political students also liked to come and watch the fights, but they generally preferred spending their time within the market district to get valuable items which were for sale. A lot of people liked to come to the prisoner arena because it provided insights into battle, however it normally required courage. When the military student joined the fights in the prisoner area, they could improve their abilities as fighters and gain insight onto the path of enlightenment. They had to be brave as it was a great challenge to their courage. However, those who studied political affairs didn't require these skills, they were not hot-blooded and often liked to work in the shadows. For those studying political affairs, the military students who engaged in battles in the prisoner arena were simply stupid brutes. Risking their life for a few purity stones was a stupid thing to do. They were probably all from poor and insignificant families. The political students enjoyed coming to the prisoner arena to watch battles, especially when military students were involved. The political students became really excited each time they saw a military student get devoured by a ferocious beast or get killed by a cultivation slave. You are Lin Feng, right? The reason why you came here is because you want to become stronger now that you have challenged Hei Mo, correct? Said a young man in yellow clothes sitting next to Bai Zhe and then added, you cannot get killed by a ferocious beast before your fight against Hei Mo. We are all too impatient and excited to see you make a fool of yourself. Lin Feng glanced at Bai Zhe. These people obviously knew who Lin Feng was because of Bai Zhe. However, Lin Feng didn't know any of them. Therefore, Lin Feng glanced at the young man in yellow clothes and then turned around and looked at the cage. With such people, the best reaction was to ignore them and continue as if they didn't exist. Wealthy and noble cultivators were arrogant and thought they were set high above others. When they said something, people would always listen to them, or at least they wouldn't ignore them. The fact that Lin Feng ignored him made the young man in yellow clothes furious. He was stupefied. The smile that he had on his face slowly turned into an evil expression. He then said coldly and loud enough so that everybody could hear him, are you deaf? Can you not hear what I'm telling you? But as before, Lin Feng ignored him. I asked you a question. Lin Feng just continued to ignore him. The young man in yellow clothes was flying into a rage from shame as it had now attracted people's attention. Cold chi was being released from his body. How noisy, said Wen Ao Shui while scratching his head. He then turned around and shouted at the young man, do you realize that you're just like a noisy barking dog? The young man in yellow was stunned. His heart was violently pounding in his chest. Usually, he was the one who insulted other people by calling them a dog, not the other way around. Or do you bark like this because you are actually the son of a dog, added Wen Ao Shui, sounding extremely firm. He dared to challenge Hei Mo. Do you think that you are stronger than Hei Mo? What do you intend to do? Asked the young man in yellow clothes with an evil expression in his eyes. He was intensely staring at Wen Ao Shui with murderous intentions and said, a dog? Do you know who you are provoking now? Wen Ao Shui remained silent and turned around without looking at the young man. He then comfortably sat down on his chair and said in a cold tone, don't think that because your family name is you, you can act arrogantly to whomever you wish. Even if your family is you, you are still a dog, and trying to make a show of your strength here would just be pathetic and ridiculous. Wen Ao Shui was calm when saying these words. The young man in yellow clothes was stupefied. How did Wen Ao Shui know his family name was you? Besides, he knew that his name was Yu and still didn't hesitate to humiliate him in public. When Lu Fei heard that his family name was Yu, she turned around and looked at him. Then, she immediately looked at Wen Ao Shui again. The Yu clan was extremely powerful within the imperial city and was worshipped by many people. Even though Wen Ao Shui knew his name, he still didn't care. It seemed like Wen Ao Shui was not easy to deal with. You, thought Lin Feng. Lin Feng had already heard that family name and not only once. In the Shuiyu country the strongest clans and sects were the Imperial clan, then the Yu clan, the Wanshou sect, the Haoyu sect, the Yunhai sect, the Ice and Snow Mountain Village and the Luoxia sect. These 8 groups of people were influential across the entire country and were known to be extremely strong. Since the Yunhai sect had been destroyed there were only 7 left, amongst which 4 powers of influence were in the imperial city. Impressively, the young man in yellow clothes was probably a member of the Yu clan. But at that moment, the sound of roaring ferocious beasts woke Lin Feng up from his thoughts. Then, an old man entered in the cage. Ferocious beast, lizard. The crowd was very excited. The lizard had extremely strong defense but was also as agile as a tiger. It was extremely strong. I don't know who will dare to enter the cage now, but in any case, it will be another spectacular battle, thought the crowd. The crowd was wondering how many people that lizard had already killed before that battle. It was probably a huge amount. Those who own this place constantly have to fill it with slaves and ferocious beasts. Are they not losing money when they get killed? Besides, they also have to give purity stones to the winners, asked Lin Feng, who was perplexed at the idea of the prisoner arena. Surprisingly, the owners of the prisoner arena always had slaves and beasts to put inside. If some of them died every day, was their project economically viable? When these slaves and ferocious beasts arrive, they are not necessarily very strong. Even if they get killed, it is not such a big deal. They rely on the experience that the slaves and beasts gain with each battle. Ferocious beasts become stronger and long for more blood with each battle. The slaves also become strong and stronger as they fight to the death. Because they grow stronger with experience, they become more expensive. Then, the owners take them out and sell them for a high price. This is precisely their goal. We come here to become stronger and increase our cultivation abilities, while the owners do the same. We use them to become stronger, but they also use us to make their beasts and slaves become stronger. Lin Feng was surprised. He was far from even considering something like that. These ferocious beasts and slaves, if they won a great deal of deadly battles, then they could become extremely powerful, which was beneficial to their owners. Besides, they also became more valuable as they became stronger. As far as purity stones are concerned, we already have to pay an entrance tax every time we want to come inside to fight or watch. Even though it's not expensive, think about the number of people who come here every day. Besides, those who sit in the first rows of the viewing platforms have to pay more. Imagine the amount of money they make every day from admission to the viewing platforms, explained Wen Ao Shui to Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. Lin Feng had just drawn conclusions too quickly. He had neglected the fact that everybody had to pay something when they came into the arena. At that moment, the old man announced, "Lizard, beast of the 4th Ling level. 28 victories." Everybody sighed in amazement when they heard the old man. That lizard was terrifying. It had already killed so many people. That means 20 purity stones of medium quality for someone at or above the 4th Ling Qi layer and 100 purity stones of medium quality for someone under the 4th Ling Qi layer, continued the old man. 20 purity stones of medium quality. That's so many, thought Lin Feng. 20 purity stones of medium quality was the equivalent of 2,000 purity stones of lower quality. That was enough to practice on the 4th floor of the Cultivation Tower for 2 years. 2 years in the Cultivation Tower, what a terrifying power one could gain from 2 years inside the tower. But putting one's life at stake to become rich is also terrifying, thought Lin Feng. Lin Feng had realized that the Yunhai sect was actually quite poor. The owner of the prisoner arena owned so many purity stones that it was frightening. 20 purity stones of medium quality were enough to buy a strong slave, a very good martial skill or an agility technique. When Lin Feng realized that, he stood up without hesitation and said indifferently, "I will participate in the next battle." I will participate in the next battle. Lin Feng's voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for everybody to hear him. I will participate in the next battle. Lin Feng's voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for everybody to hear him. Everybody was surprised when looking at Lin Feng. He surprisingly wanted to fight against a 4th Ling level lizard. He was so young. Those who dared to enter in the cage all considered themselves as very strong cultivators. They were not stupidly playing with their life, but that lizard had already killed 28 people, it meant that it was very powerful and strengthened in battle. A cultivator of the 4th Ling Qi layer who wanted to fight the lizard was taking a huge risk. It would be very difficult to emerge victorious for an average cultivator of the 5th Ling Qi layer. Someone under the 4th Ling Qi layer would never be able to win against it. That is why the reward for them if they won was 100 purity stones of medium quality. Bai Zhe smiled when he saw that Lin Feng was standing up. It looked like another military student was going to die in the prisoner arena. What a pity. He's going to die before his battle against Hei Mo. It's terribly disappointing, said the young man in yellow clothes while laughing. Lin Feng was challenging a lizard, he was definitely going to die. Born as a beggar, he will also die as a beggar. For a few purity stones, he dares to risk his life. Not only will he lose his life but he will also lose the few purity stones that he has. Lin Feng turned around and looked at the young man in yellow clothes in a playful way. The prisoner arena can lend a stage to 2 cultivators who wish to battle to the death. Could it be that you want to have a try against me, said Lin Feng in a loud voice which echoed throughout the arena. The young man was speaking so loud that a great number of people could hear him, so Lin Feng spoke so loud that everyone in the viewing platform could hear him. The young man was stupefied and was speechless. Are you fighting or not? You keep talking bullshit yet do not have the spine to take action. A piece of trash with a big mouth can also be a coward, what a surprise, said Lin Feng fiercely. The young man in yellow clothes was furious. The sensation that everybody was looking at him with mocking glares made him even more furious. He was evilly staring at Lin Feng. Poor guy, he's so pitiful, said Wen Ao Shua while laughing loudly. It was useless to keep talking to him as he had no backbone, so Lin Feng ignored him again and walked towards the border of the cage, moving close to the old man. The old man opened the door of the cage and let Lin Feng enter. Lin Feng went in and suddenly felt oppressed. It was as if the qi of all the people and creatures in the cage that was oppressing him. The sensation was very uncomfortable. When the lizard saw Lin Feng come in, it roared loudly. Ling-level ferocious beasts were very smart. They knew who their enemies were. It knew that if it didn't kill Lin Feng, it would have to die. The expression within its eyes looked ice cold. It was slowly and cautiously crawling towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at the lizard move towards him. Lin Feng looked indifferent and calm. He didn't look agitated at all. But suddenly, the gigantic body of the lizard jumped up into the air and flew towards Lin Feng at full speed. It was 1,000 times faster than a moment before when it was crawling. 8 strikes of desolation. Lin Feng used both of his hands to unleash his strikes. Lin Feng had mastered this skill to perfection. With one strike, he could kill a normal cultivator of the 4th Ling Qi layer. Surprisingly, the lizard didn't avoid Lin Feng's attack. It opened its claws and blocked Lin Feng's attack. It managed to weaken the power of Lin Feng's attack. Of course, 8 strikes of desolation was an extremely powerful attack, and it was impossible for that lizard to completely disintegrate its power. A few strikes still managed to pass through and crash into its body, which made it fly backwards. It roared extremely loudly as if it had been angered. However, what surprised Lin Feng is that it wasn't injured at all. As expected, it has a very strong defense. No wonder it has managed to kill 28 cultivators already, thought Lin Feng. It emitted a loud bestial roar. Its eyes grew colder and colder. It was an incredibly horrifying sight to behold. Suddenly, it dashed towards Lin Feng again. Lin Feng didn't use his 8 strikes of desolation. Instead, he released an extremely strong sword qi which created whirlwinds in the air. It seemed like the body of the lizard was being oppressed by the power of the qi. RAAWWWWWRRR, the sharp sword qi made the lizard roar extremely loudly. Its sharp claws were moving towards Lin Feng with deadly precision. If Lin Feng came into contact with these claws, then he would be cut into pieces. At that moment, Lin Feng jumped straight towards the lizard. He had moved into the range of the lizard's strikes. He also slightly raised his hand into the air. What is he doing? He's using his hand to block the claws of the lizard. He's crazy. He's going to die. People in the crowd were making various comments. Most of them were stupefied. Many people got lacerated into pieces by the claws of the lizard after the first attack. Its claws were even sharper than most swords. Lin Feng's hands finally reached the lizard's claws, and suddenly, a radiant white light filled the entire cage. The crowd was astonished. Lin Feng didn't seem to have been injured, but the lizard was screaming and howling in agony. How's that possible? How could his hand be sharper than the lizard's claws? The crowd was astonished. They all looked puzzled. Lin Feng continued moving nearer and nearer to the lizard. Surprisingly, he wanted a close combat battle against the lizard. They were both moving as fast as lightning. Crack! Suddenly a trail of brown blood splashed into the air. There was a huge wound on the lizard's body. What a terrifying attack, and he did that with only his hand. He concentrated sword qi into his hand and it became even sharper than a sword, said a cultivator in the crowd. The crowd was astonished. That young man was really a monstrous genius. What many cultivators of the 4th Ling Qi layer had tried in vain before, Lin Feng had done it so easily with his bare hands. When they saw that, Bai Zhe and the young man in yellow clothes were both astonished and furious. They hadn't thought that Lin Feng was so strong. Obviously, he hid his strength on the entrance day. Bai Zhe felt ridiculous and laughable. He realized how strong Lin Feng was. On that day, he had called him a beggar each time he opened his mouth. At that moment, he realized that Lin Feng was a much stronger cultivator than him. He would never be able to defeat Lin Feng no matter how many resources his family provided him. Lin Feng didn't know what all these people were thinking at that moment though. He just wanted to achieve his victory over the lizard. At that moment, he could concentrate all sword energy into his hand. It wasn't as terrifying as his sword attacks, but it was still extremely strong. Each time Lin Feng's hand touched the lizard, blood was sent splashing around the arena. RRRAAWWWWWWRRR. After a short time, the lizard had already lost a great deal of blood. It gave a horrible shriek. I'll stop playing with you now, thought Lin Feng. He went even closer to the lizard. Immediately, a gigantic sword chi emerged from his hand and with a single strike he beheaded the lizard and put it out of its misery. The entire crowd was astonished. Wow, sighed the crowd in amazement and thought, how strong. He just used his hand as a sword. You win. Here are 20 purity stones of medium quality, said the old man entering the cage while handing Lin Feng the purity stones. Lin Feng impolitely took the stones and left the cage without sparing a glance at the old man. Lin Feng glanced to the side where the cultivation slaves were fighting. This time, another cultivation slave had been killed. The two sides were separated by an iron gate. If it was opened, the slaves and the beasts would be together in a single area. When Lin Feng came out from inside of the cage, he felt much better as inside it was a very oppressing atmosphere. Lin Feng moved back towards his seat, glanced at the young man in yellow clothes with a mocking look and then sat down. On both sides of the cage, two old men were bringing in a new ferocious beast and a new slave. The slave's hair was so messy that his facial features were almost invisible. He had handcuffs on his hands and chains at his feet which made a loud metallic noise after each step he took. Suddenly, the slave raised his head and his face became visible. There was a word on his face, June. The word covered his entire face which made it difficult to see his real facial features. The word covered his entire face which made it difficult to see his real facial features. His entire appearance made him look extremely savage and hideous. Besides, his two dark eyes made him look even more cruel. His expression was enough to make anyone shiver. How cold, said the crowd. They were all shivering. Cultivation slaves were fighting every day all day. They were extremely strong and battle-hardened warriors. Therefore, each time a cultivation slave came from the prisoner arena, there would always be fights between those who wanted to buy the slave. Lin Feng frowned. What a cruel method. He didn't know where these slaves came from, but marking their face was going too far. It completely violated their human rights and made them nothing more but animals. They would never be able to live in the real world, they were doomed to living in that hell forever. That slave is of the 3rd Ling Chi layer. He has already won 16 battles. If somebody wins against him, he can receive 20 purity stones if he's above the 3rd Ling Chi layer, 100 if he's of the 3rd Ling Chi layer or lower, said the old man leading him into the cage. The whole crowd was stupefied. He had won 12 battles less than the lizard but had won against all his challengers. He was incredibly terrifying of an opponent. Bai Zhe, 3rd Ling Chi layer, he is the same level as you, said the young man in yellow clothes. Bai Zhe was surprised. He immediately nodded and said, I'm going. All right, said the young man in yellow clothes while smiling. Bai Zhe walked towards the edge of the cage near the old man who was inside. Bai Zhe nodded to him. The old man looked at Bai Zhe and frowned, he then said, this slave is extremely strong, are you sure that you want to go into the cage? I'm sure, said Bai Zhe while nodding without hesitation. The old man thus let Bai Zhe enter the cage. Humph, groaned Wen Ao Shui from on the bleachers to show his discontent. Lin Feng was also surprised. Surprisingly, they had warned Bai Zhe that it was a dangerous battle. When he wanted to fight against the lizard, the old man hadn't said anything even though the lizard was extremely strong. Lin Feng, that slave is out of luck, said Wen Ao Shui. Lin Feng looked at him in a strange way and asked, that's weird because I know how strong Bai Zhe is and he doesn't have exceptional strength, nothing special. I even get the feeling that he could lose this battle before it even begins. Bai Zhe could never lose. Do you know who is in charge of the prisoner arena? Asked Wen Ao Shui. Lin Feng was surprised and looking at Wen Ao Shui with big eyes. The Bai clan is in charge of the prisoner arena. Everything here is controlled by his clan, said Wen Ao Shui indifferently. Lin Feng was stunned. No wonder that the old man was warning Bai Zhe, because it was his clan that run the arena. What if Bai Zhe loses? They only look at the process. Not at the result, said Wen Ao Shui mysteriously, who seemed to understand what was going on in the background. At that moment, Bai Zhe was facing the slave within the fighting stage of the cage. A strong and sharp qi emerged within the atmosphere. Bai Zhe shivered when he saw the bestial expression in the slave's eyes. Die, shouted the cultivation slave. He then immediately threw himself at Bai Zhe. Everybody who entered the cage wanted to kill him. If he did not kill the people who entered the cage, then they would try to kill him. The chains that he was wearing suddenly emitted a whistling sound in the air. The slave was jumping towards Bai Zhe looking like a deadly spear. Hurricane spirit, whispered Lin Feng when saw that a hurricane spirit had appeared behind Bai Zhe's body. Bai Zhe was extremely arrogant and thought that he was a true genius, but Lin Feng had required only one finger to defeat him. He hadn't even had the time to release his spirit. He had been humiliated to the extreme. But Bai Zhe was only 18. In any other place, he would be considered as a genius. In the Yunhai sect, it would have been no exception. However, in the imperial city, there were many young cultivators who were much stronger than him. Genius was a very relative word in that context. The slave didn't even look at Bai Zhe. His chains were still lacerating the atmosphere and diffusing whistling sounds as they cut the very air itself. How ferocious, thought Bai Zhe, who started shaking and retreating a few steps backwards. At that moment, a vine illusion had started twining around Bai Zhe's body. The slave was still flying towards Bai Zhe like a spear rushing through the air. There was absolutely no superfluous movement made by the slave, he was going directly for the kill. Bai Zhe was in a fatal position. Bai Zhe's pupils shrank. He struggled to move his hands and suddenly a strong qi flowed from his body which looked like a hurricane and moved towards the slave's chains at full speed. Suddenly, Bai Zhe was almost suffocating because the slave had put even more strength into his vine illusion which was twining around Bai Zhe's body. The slave, with the aid of his vine spirit, had managed to control his flight through the air and his trajectory looked like a perfect arch within the air. He was moving straight towards Bai Zhe. How strong! The crowd was amazed at the sight. The slave was extremely strong. Every single move he made was perfect. He was fast, agile and experienced in battle. Lin Feng frowned. He remembered that he had already seen that kind of spirit. Han Man's friend, Pa Jun, had a vine spirit too. Pa Jun and Jun the slave. Lin Feng looked surprised. He was staring at that slave as if he had understood something terrifying. Was it a coincidence? How could they have the same name and use the same spirit? Boom! While Bai Zhe was doing his best to avoid the attack, the slave finally reached him and sent him flying backwards. However, he was not injured. The slave was stupefied. He had carried out a very strong attack but hadn't managed to kill his opponent. How could he have not died from that attack? Stop! At that moment, a loud voice emerged in the atmosphere. The slave was surprised, stopped moving and stared at the old man. This battle ends here, said the old man indifferently. The crowd was stupefied. End of the battle? Only death could make a battle end, those were the rules. How could it just end during this fight? It looks like the old man and the current challenger have a relationship, thought the crowd, especially when they remembered that the old man had warned Bai Zhe. That was the only possibility. We're not done yet, how could the battle end here? Asked the slave with a husky voice. He was fixedly staring at the old man. The old man's expression suddenly became evil. A slave dared refute his words. Since you want to die, I will help you achieve your aim, said the old man with an evil smile on his face. Release the beast. When the old man finished talking, on the other side of the arena, a middle-aged man appeared. The crowd was surprised by the fact of what he was riding as a beast-like monster. It had 4 legs and chains around its neck. Jun, this is the fiercest of beasts, and while you are in its presence you would do best to act docile. Today, you will fight against it. If you win, you will live. If you lose, you will die, said the old man evilly. June was fixedly staring at him. Surprisingly, he wanted him to fight against it. That old man was an animal. When the beast heard these words, it raised its head and bestially looked at the old man. When looking at the situation, Lin Feng, who was sat on the viewing platform, started to release an extremely strong and cold qi. That strong freezing qi seemed like it was coming from the depth of the earth itself. That strong freezing qi seemed like it was coming from the depth of the earth itself. When Ao Shui, who was sitting next to Lin Feng, was extremely surprised. A strange expression appeared on his face and he looked at Lin Feng. How cold, said When Ao Shui while looking at Lin Feng with his beautiful woman-like eyes. Why was Lin Feng's body releasing so much cold qi? Not only When Ao Shui was surprised but the others as well. Lu Fei, Jing Yun, Duan Feng and Yuan Shan were all staring at Lin Feng. They could all feel the cold qi that he was releasing on their skin. The moment the qi had reached them they were freezing cold. Only Jing Yun glanced at Lin Feng for a second and then looked at the monster again. She looked at the legs of the beast. Its legs were tied with chains but it seemed like its forelegs were actually hands, human hands. Similarly to cultivation slaves, it had a mark on its face. Han was written across its face. Jing Yun got the feeling of déjà vu. She started to look closely at the beast and saw that it looked almost human. Han man, said Jing Yun. She couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't believe what she was seeing. That beast couldn't be Han man. But in view of the cold qi coming from Lin Feng's body, Jing Yun thought that she must have been right with her assumption. That couldn't possibly be anybody else. An expression full of hatred and wrath suddenly appeared on Jing Yun's face. That band of animals was suddenly treating Han man that way. Huh? Said When Ao Shui when he heard Jing Yun. He was surprised to see Jing Yun's facial expression. You and Lin Feng know that person? Asked When Ao Shui to Jing Yun. Jing Yun looked sure of herself and nodded. Yes, we do. He is our good friend. When the others heard Jing Yun, they were stupefied. No wonder Lin Feng had become so furious to the extent that some cold qi was released from his body. So that man that was made into a beast was actually Lin Feng's friend. Ha! Not only do they complain about the state of the world and show compassion for trash, but they also make friends with slaves. They are true to their names as beggars. Friends with slaves. Ha! The political students were making fun of Lin Feng and the others. They had heard what Jing Yun had said. Ha ha ha, their friend is treated as a beast and there is even a person riding him. Ha ha, said the young man in yellow clothes. Lin Feng slowly turned around and looked at him. Suddenly, the young man in yellow clothes turned deathly pale. He looked terrified. He looked so cold, so heartless. Thought the young man in yellow. Lin Feng's eyes were expressionless and lifeless. Filthy beggar, said the young man in yellow clothes while gnashing his teeth. He had been momentarily scared of Lin Feng because of the expression in his eyes. How was that possible? Boom! Lin Feng crushed his seat into tiny pieces with a punch. The seats on the viewing platform were all made from solid stone. Lin Feng had crushed it with a single strike. He then started walking towards the young man in yellow. Boom! Lin Feng crushed another seat. The heart of the young man in yellow clothes started pounding. At that moment, Lin Feng arrived in front of him. Lin Feng grabbed the young man's throat. His movement had been as fast as lightning, so that the young man hadn't even had the time to dodge. Lin Feng then lifted the young man's body into the air with one hand. The young man in yellow clothes could hardly breathe from the power of Lin Feng's grip. Boom! Without hesitation, Lin Feng smashed the young man's body into the stone chair that he was sitting on. The noise from his body colliding with the stone was terrifying. Then, Lin Feng pressed the young man's head onto the ground and then trampled over his face. The young man was suffocating from the pressure of Lin Feng's foot on his face. This had happened in the blink of an eye. Everybody was astonished. All these political students were watching the scene speechless. They were astonished by Lin Feng's actions. When they felt Lin Feng's cold qi, they didn't dare to attack him. "If you say one more word, I will crush you under my foot like a bug," said Lin Feng in a low voice, fixedly staring at the young man in yellow clothes under his foot. His voice was extremely cold. At that moment, the young man in yellow clothes was bleeding so much that he was half-conscious and didn't really realize what was going on. His head was spinning and he was just staring blankly into the distance. "A supposed beggar has trampled all over your face. Now everybody will make fun of you just like you made fun of the slaves. The difference is that the slaves are worth much more than you," said Lin Feng coldly. He then removed his foot and ignored the young man in yellow clothes. He started walking towards the cage. With every step he took closer to the cage, the cold qi emerging from his body was getting colder and colder. Everybody was staring at Lin Feng, wondering what he was doing and why such a freezing cold qi was being released from his body. Those near Lin Feng were particularly stupefied. That young man was incredibly terrifying. What was wrong with him? Those in the cage could feel that the atmosphere was getting colder and colder. The old man was astonished when he felt the cold qi being released by Lin Feng, who was slowly walking towards the cage. Bai Zhe was also stunned, especially since he had also seen the scene a moment before with the young man in yellow. Lin Feng was definitely crazy and it wasn't a good idea to provoke insane people. Bai Zhe's heart was pounding at full speed in his chest. When Pejun saw Lin Feng and how ferocious he looked, his heart also started pounding. Lin Feng. It was Lin Feng. He had thought he would never see people he knew again. As far as Han Man was concerned, when he saw Lin Feng, he blinked a few times as if he was seeing things. The bestial expression in his eyes disappeared and was replaced with a sorrowful expression. He had been forced to live like a ferocious beast. He was forced into life and death battle constantly and could have died at any time. He had never thought he would see Lin Feng again. Han Man hated Duan Tian Lang, that animal. And he hated everybody at the prisoner arena. When all the events happened in the Yunhai sect, Han Man and Pejun had survived. But if Han Man had known that he would become a slave and be forced to live the way he had, he would have preferred to die back on that day. Many survivors had been taken as prisoners and then sold as slaves. That's how Han Man had been sold to the prisoner arena. During his time in the prisoner arena, Han Man had become lifeless. He was humiliated from morning to evening and beaten like a dog. He had even been forced to act as a ferocious wild beast. In the prisoner camp, he didn't stop killing his friends from the morning till the night. He had been taught that if he didn't kill, he would die. If he killed, he wouldn't die. He had become much stronger and had a savage ferocity. Han Man had resisted, and because he had tried to resist, he had been forced to live as a beast. At that moment, when he saw Lin Feng, Han Man's expression gradually changed. His eyes and face gradually turned red. Tears slowly started flowing down from his eyes. "Lin Feng, my brother," said Han Man as he hung his head in shame. He was ashamed to be in this situation where he was rode like a beast, and Lin Feng was, once again, rushing into a powerful foe to save him. Han Man knew what kind of person Lin Feng was. He had gone to the precipice of the abyss to save him, he had gone into the life and death arena to save him, and once again he was moving into danger to save him. No matter whom he was facing, Lin Feng would never let his friends down, even if the opponent was incredibly strong. There is no one that he would not challenge for the sake of his friends. His life was worth nothing if he abandoned his friends. And at that moment, Lin Feng was risking his life again for his friends. "Brother, you have suffered hardships." Lin Feng's dark and cold expression suddenly changed and was replaced with a warm smile. Han Man raised his head again when he heard Lin Feng. Tears were unceasingly flowing down his cheeks. There are some friends who will come to save you no matter how dark the situation becomes. Brother. The old man was surprised when he heard the conversation between them. An evil expression appeared on his face. Lin Feng surprisingly knew that slave and was a good friend of his. The old man looked at Lin Feng, who was slowly moving towards them. He then walked towards Lin Feng to prevent him from walking further and said, "It doesn't matter if you were friends before. Now, he is marked. He is doomed to be a slave for the rest of his life." Brother. The old man was surprised when he heard the conversation between them. An evil expression appeared on his face. Lin Feng surprisingly knew that slave and was a good friend of his. The old man looked at Lin Feng, who was slowly moving towards them. He then walked towards Lin Feng to prevent him from walking further and said, "It doesn't matter if you were friends before. Now, he is marked. He is doomed to be a slave for the rest of his life. If I put a mark on your face, will you become a slave too?" said Lin Feng extremely coldly. The old man smiled and said, "You want to die, right? If I die, it will mean that someone killed me after your death," said Lin Feng coldly. Suddenly, the qi emerging from his body grew even colder and started moving towards the old man. "You are overestimating yourself," said the old man while smiling. Suddenly, his body pierced through the air looking like a hurricane and moved towards Lin Feng. Sword unsheathing. Lin Feng used his sword unsheathing skill. He had mastered it to perfection. He was extremely quick and agile since a single strike needed to be enough to kill an opponent. But the old man ignored Lin Feng's attack and managed to avoid it while moving closer to him. He then thrust out his fist and punched Lin Feng in the chest. Arg! Blood sprayed from Lin Feng's mouth and he was propelled backwards. Seventh Qi layer, the crowd was stupefied. The old man was incredibly strong. He had broken through to the seventh Qi layer, and compared to Lin Feng the difference was too big. Lin Feng wouldn't be able to withstand another attack. But Lin Feng raised his head again. He started moving towards the old man again. He looked as cold and determined as ever. The entire atmosphere around the cage was filled with a freezing cold qi. "You're very talented. You could have had a brilliant future, but because you're courting death, I have no other option but to help you find it," said the old man when he saw that Lin Feng continued to approach. He then laughed coldly and said, "You have only broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer, you could never touch me, not even once, and killing me? Only in your dreams. No need to kill him. Put a mark on him. Make him a slave. Wouldn't it be much better that way?" said Bai Zhe. The old man was surprised by those words but then smiled and said, "Young master, you are extremely clever. Of course, that would be a much better solution. He's much stronger than that Han beast. It would probably be a great spectacle to see him fighting as a slave." "Let's do it," said Bai Zhe while evilly staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng had acted recklessly, there was no choice. Lin Feng didn't even give him a glance though. He kept walking. Each and every step he took was filled with determination and coldness. Erg! Han Man roared just like an animal. His body was shaking, but the middle-aged man was holding him down with chains. Han Man couldn't move freely. The old man hit Lin Feng again. Blood splashed once again from his mouth. Lin Feng's body was projected away and struck against the wall of the cage so hard that it made the cage vibrate. Just like the old man had said, Lin Feng was strong but had only broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer. He could never compete with someone of the seventh Ling Qi layer. When Lu Fei and the others saw Lin Feng's body get blown away, they all stood up and walked towards the cage. "Wait, wait," said Wen Ao Shui, preventing them from moving further. "Get out of the way," said Lu Fei. Wen Ao Shui only had a wry smile on his face. "Lin Feng cannot win this fight. If you go there, you will only die with him." "Get out of the way," said Lu Fei, coldly ignoring what he had just said. I'm going, said Wen Ao Shua while shaking his head. His body suddenly transformed into an illusion and flew towards the cage. When he arrived at the edge of the cage, he didn't enter it. He had the feeling that Lin Feng wouldn't be so easy to kill. Wen Ao Shua was terribly touched by Lin Feng's actions. That guy would risk his life for his friends. Per Jun was touched as well. The mark on his face was moving along with his facial muscles. Such a person should be respected by everyone. Lin Feng's eyes became pitch black. He was slowly walking forwards. In his heart, there was no emotion at all, only darkness. Die, shouted Lin Feng furiously. His deadly sword fluttered in the air. A grayish-black fog rose around his sword and started rushing into the atmosphere. Is it the best you can do? Said the old man while laughing. He joined his hands together and released a hurricane-like wind. A deadly qi unceasingly flowed out from his body. Lin Feng's sword was shaking with intensity. At that moment, Lin Feng threw his sword through the air towards the old man. It pierced through atmosphere at full speed and lacerated everything which came into contact with it. What's the point? Said the old man fearlessly. When Lin Feng's sword arrived in front of the old man, it abruptly stopped. Goodbye, yelled the old man, causing Lin Feng's long sword fly away into the distance. At that moment, Lin Feng had landed in front of the old man and thrust his hand forward with the sharpness and precision of a sword. Die, said the old man with a cold smile on the corner of his mouth. He disintegrated Lin Feng's sword qi and punched Lin Feng again. Thick dark blood gushed out from Lin Feng's mouth. Lin Feng, however, had caught the old man's hand using both his hands. He surprisingly hadn't been pushed back. Everybody was stupefied. What is he doing? Lin Feng was probably going to die because of this. That action was a big mistake. It seemed like there was a large wound on Lin Feng's chest where the old man unceasingly punched. There was a huge blood stain. The scene was terrifying. But Lin Feng didn't release the old man's hand. He was firmly and tightly holding it between his two hands. Everybody was staring at Lin Feng. How fierce. These were probably his last moments and he still didn't release the old man's hand. Had he renounced his will to live? Some of Lin Feng's blood even splashed on Han Man. His heart was pounding and he was breathing heavily. Dust rose under Han Man's body. Suddenly, the ground started shaking. The expression in his eyes was progressively changing. His red eyes slowly turned yellowish-brown and looked like that of a bloodthirsty wild beast. They were filled with intense wrath. Roar! A bestial roar came from Han Man's mouth. It seemed like the ground was going to cave in. The ground was shaking so much that it seemed like it could cave it at any time. More and more yellow dust was rising into the air. A thick layer of sand was covering Han Man's body. The middle-aged man who was on Han Man's back wondered what was happening. His heart started beating faster and faster. What's going on? When the middle-aged man saw all the dust flying around him, he was astonished. Suddenly, the chains on Han Man's body broke into 1,000 tiny pieces. When the old man and Lin Feng, who were fighting, saw that, they were stupefied too. Huh! The old man was surprised. He didn't understand what was happening. His pupils shrank. Celestial spirit. Suddenly, a dazzling light as bright as the sun burst from Lin Feng's expressionless and pitch-black eyes. Since Lin Feng's celestial spirit had awoken, he had not taken advantage of the abilities that his spirit provided him. This was the first time. The old man slightly closed his eyes. He wanted to move back but Lin Feng was still tightly holding his hand. Suddenly, the old man jumped up in the air, taking Lin Feng along with him. Die, said Lin Feng in a low voice. He could see everything clearly thanks to his celestial spirit. Every movement of the old man was very clear in Lin Feng's mind. At the same time, Lin Feng's body turned into a shadow. A dazzling light appeared and suddenly, a long trail of blood sprayed into the air. That shadow, the crowd was stupefied by what they had seen. Lin Feng had become almost invisible with his shadow. Just because you're extremely strong, it doesn't mean that I can't kill you, said a cold yet calm voice. The old man was holding his throat as blood was gushing through his fingers. He was falling slowly to the ground. The old man's body collapsed. He was lying dead on the ground with a shocked expression still on his face. At that moment, the entire atmosphere became calm again. The old man's body collapsed. He was lying dead on the ground with a shocked expression still on his face. At that moment, the entire atmosphere became calm again. Lin Feng, who had only broken through to the 4th Ling Qi layer, had killed the old man who had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. In that world, 1 Ling Qi layer was already a huge difference in battle. A cultivator who could defeat people with higher Qi layers than his own was a real genius. The whole crowd had the impression that they were in a dream. It had looked like it was the end for Lin Feng, but the final result was strangely the exact opposite of what everyone was thinking. The crowd was stunned. Lin Feng had been determined until the end and shocked the entire crowd. Quick, ruthless, agile, skillful and determined, the crowd admired Lin Feng as a cultivator. His strategy had been amazing. He had planned everything that happened from the beginning. At the start of the fight he was not even using a fraction of his true speed. He wanted to hide how fast he really was, and then at the end, he had carried out an extremely quick and lethal attack. Lin Feng coughed loudly. Blood revealed itself with each cough. There was also a large amount of blood flowing out from the wound on his chest. He took out a jar of pills from his pocket. Lin Feng took 2 pills out and quickly swallowed them. Suddenly, he started feeling more and more relaxed. This guy is insane, said Wen Ao Shua while looking at Lin Feng. He had a smile on his face. Lin Feng was hard to understand. What he had done seemed like a miracle. He had surprisingly managed to kill the old man. 7th Qi layer, thought Wen Ao Shua. Besides, where did that other sword come from? Lin Feng had gotten rid of his long sword during the battle and nobody had noticed that he still had another sword. He had used that sword to slit the old man's throat. Lin Feng, brother, said Han Man. At that moment, one of his pupils was a deep red and the other one was brown. It was extremely strange to see. One eyes looked like it had been bathed in blood and the other looked like the depth of the earth. Don't worry. I don't die so easily, said Lin Feng, whose cold expression turned into a warm and friendly smile when looking at Han Man. Han Man roared again while looking at the sky. The ground started shaking. Yellow sand started flying around Han Man's body. Suddenly, his entire body transformed into a sandstorm. What's going on? Asked some people in the crowd. That was so strange. A moment ago, the crowd hadn't really paid attention to him because they were too fascinated by the fight between Lin Feng and the old man, but they had noticed that something abnormal was happening to him. They were all speechless. The sand flying around Han Man's body was getting thicker and thicker. As the sand grew denser, the light grew more dazzling and bright. At that moment, there was so much sand flying around Han Man that it had created a huge dome of sand. Han Man was surrounded by a gigantic sand sphere. Lin Feng frowned. He didn't understand what was happening to Han Man. Crack. A large crack appeared in the gigantic sphere surrounding Han Man's body. It was as large as a lotus flower. Han Man's body could be seen once again. Everybody's eyes shrank. They were all stupefied and looked incredibly perplexed. Han Man's hair was very long and its color was pitch black, but at this moment, his hair had turned yellow like sand. The sight of him made people in the crowd start to shiver. Han Man looked incredibly majestic at that moment, like an ancient god. The only thing which hadn't changed was the slave mark he had on his face. Han Man opened his eyes. It seemed like there was a storm growing inside his eyes. Wow! From head to foot, Han Man was filled with explosive force and power. Han Man turned around and looked at the middle-aged man with a vicious gaze. The middle-aged man was scared by Han Man's strange bestial look. Die, shouted Han Man. He started walking slowly, but his steps were extremely heavy on the ground. He stopped in place and threw a punch towards the middle-aged man. Yellow sand was glowing all around his fist. The middle-aged man was surprised by the attack. He didn't have time to dodge the attack, so he raised his fist and a strong power emerged. Boom! When their two fists collided, a huge cloud of sand rose up in the air, but suddenly, a huge quantity of sand moved towards the middle-aged man at full speed and buried his body in a solid tomb of sand. Rear! Han Man sounded furious. He punched the sand in which the middle-aged man was buried with such power that it cracked open. The body of the middle-aged man was crushed and his body had exploded at the point of impact. However, there was no blood to be seen, only sand surrounded the body. What? The whole crowd was gasping with astonishment. They were staring at Han Man. His attack was incredibly violent. Not only had he trapped the middle-aged man and buried him alive, but he then also stuck with such power that part of his body exploded. The crowd didn't have the slightest impression that Han Man was any weaker than Lin Feng. His blood vessels have awoken, whispered Wen Ao Shui, blankly staring at Han Man through the cage. That's right. Han Man's blood vessels had awoken. Only when the blood circulation had reached a perfect rhythm, the blood vessels could awaken and grant the blood a special power. If someone's blood vessels awoke, their offspring would also be granted the same power. When blood vessels awoke, it provided cultivators with an amazing strength which was previously hidden. However, usually the cultivators who had awoken their blood vessels would have a blood spirit. What Han Man had achieved was a miracle to the extent that Wen Ao Shui had never even heard that it was possible. However, there was no possible doubt, Han Man's vessels had awoken, there was no other possible explanation for the strange transformation that had happened to his body. Lin Feng was also dumbstruck. How strong! At that moment, Han Man had the strength of the 5th Ling Qi layer, which meant he was even stronger than Lin Feng, who was only at the 4th Ling Qi layer. At that moment, many people moved towards the cage. Lin Feng was surprised. Lin Feng, brother, that little brat should make his grave here, said Han Man while glancing at Bai Zai. He wanted to make Lin Feng a slave a moment before. Bai Zai had nowhere to run. Han Man started walking towards Bai Zai and raised his fist into the air. Lin Feng slowly turned around and looked at Bai Zai. At that moment, Bai Zai's face turned deathly pale and he started retreating backwards. You said that you wanted to make me a slave, right? Said Lin Feng while walking towards Bai Zai. When Bai Zai heard Lin Feng, he started shaking with terror and shook his head. Come save me, shouted Bai Zai. How could it end like this? This place belonged to his clan. If he wanted something, then he could get it, but at that moment, the situation was critical for him and he had no way to escape. At that moment, many people were moving towards the cage in an attempt to help Bai Zai. They were all stopping close to Wen Ao Shui, who was blocking the entrance of the cage. Wen Ao Shui was just leaning against the entrance of cage. He had a cynical smile on his face. When Bai Zai saw that he wasn't moving, he shouted, Wen Ao Shui. You dare! Wen Ao Shui was provoking the young master of the Bai clan. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.